Right, folks, we have titled this the Realignment Blowout Show. That means it needs to be fast and furious. And it's kind of started that way behind the scenes. We appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks for hanging in there for a bit of a late start. And we wanted to set you up on the situation concerning the latest reports from The Athletic, in particular concerning the ACC, Stanford, and SMU, and then also some news concerning the Big 12, or at least reports. We will call them reports coming out of the Big 12 concerning Oregon State and San Diego State. But we've got a couple guests on the line that have beaten me to the punch. So they are here and ready to roll. So we got Tony Siracusa, last word on college football. We also have Spencer McLaughlin joining us from, no, I'm sorry. I thought that was Spencer McLaughlin down there. I believe that's Eric Cohen. We are inviting and communicating with guests we've never had on before. So please identify yourself.
Hey, I'm JR. Can you hear me?
Yes. How you doing today?
Well, it's my first time. I appreciate you having me on. And I have some thoughts about some of the previous 14 teams who were added. And then I was hoping that you might give some more thoughts on Stanford, Cal, SMU. Then I forget, is there a fourth one that the ACC is considering?
Oh, I apologize. So we've had a lot of communications with a lot of people just here in the last few minutes because we've had some guests cancel and we've had other guests take their place, people that I'm not familiar with. So are you're a caller?
I am
Correct.
A caller. Yes.
I am sorry. I thought this was a writer showing up. No. So JR, thanks for joining the show right out of the gate. And again, my apologies to everyone because we had some personal issues and phone calls come in here at the very last second that had to be addressed. So we got Tony Siracusa on the line. Last word on college football. Thanks, Tony, for being here.
Of course.
So we're kind of going at this from behind and going forward. We weren't able to set up or set the stage for everyone concerning what's going on right now. But JR, you've joined the show. Thank you so much for being here as a first-time caller. Serve up your comment or question to Tony and myself.
Well, I have my own YouTube channel, and I produced a video yesterday with my rankings for the 14 teams that were added to the Big 10, SEC, and Big 12 for 2023 and 2024. I was hoping to just list them off and see what you guys think and just kind of discuss it a little bit. So
sure.
And I don't know if you want me to share my screen or something like that. I don't know how easy it'll be to list them off, but I guess I'll just go right for it. So the 14th team I had was Colorado, and then 13 BYU, 12 Arizona, 11 Cincinnati, 10 Arizona State, 9 Houston, 8 Utah, 7 UCF, 6 Oregon, 5 UCLA, 4 Washington, 3 Oklahoma, 2 USC, and 1 Texas.
Okay, I'm sorry, JR. I am completely lost on what that is a list of. You have mixed up the Big 10, the Big 12, and a lot of Big 12, and then you threw us a curveball with the SEC and the Big 10 there at the end.
Yeah. So I'm probably not explaining it very well. I apologize. I'm just ranking them on who was added to the Power 5 conferences here in 2023 and 2024. Okay. Like who is the best addition to those conferences, yes. What they bring. Yes. A lot of what you talked about with genetics the other day kind of inspired me with the TV, the expenses, how much they spend, all that kind of stuff. Not really taking, I took into account somewhat of how many wins they have and stuff. But more those kind of behind the scenes things that we don't always think about.
Tony, were you able to grasp those 14 off the top of your head?
Yeah. I don't have too much issue with it. Maybe team moving a spot up or a spot down. I think that I'm one of those people who says I'll believe Texas when Texas shows up for a full season. I don't think that they're going to have an easy time in the SEC. Oklahoma moving to the SEC, Brent Venables has got a very challenging task in front of them. They didn't play well last year for a variety of reasons. But look, they're moderately reasonable moves. I mean, this is Texas's third conference in my lifetime. So, it's not like they haven't moved around before. I think one of the teams that is going to benefit the most from the move is Utah, because I think they're going to play very well in the Big 12. Look, I mean, they're sad to leave the Pac-12. They've won it the last 2 years. They've played well in the Rose Bowl. I think they are going to be very competitive from the opening week next year in the Big 12. So I like for Utah to do big things. Arizona State, Arizona, they're going to struggle. You know me, Mark. I'm on the Jed Fish train. I think Jed is a really good coach. I think he's got players at the Arizona program sold on what he's doing. Arizona State, on the other hand, is going in the opposite direction. So there's a lot there that remains to be seen. UCLA and USC, it's I think the move benefits them both. Of course, what looked like a pretty intriguing schedule for 2024 now gets thrown in the trash can as Oregon and Washington also join the conference and everything has to be reconfigured. One of the things I see from a lot of Big Ten fans on social media is, those West Coast schools, they got to come play in Columbus or Happy Valley in November and it's cold. And, I look at that and I'm like, have you ever been to Salt Lake City on a Saturday night at 4,000 foot elevation in the middle of November? Because raising my hand, I have. and have you ever been to Pullman, where the AstroTurf is so bad that it's like concrete when it gets that cold? The Pac-12 teams are fine. They're going to be used to it, and they will all survive, just as those Midwest schools and East Coast schools will be fine going out to Southern California or to the Pacific Northwest, at any time of the year. It's not that big of a deal. So, but I think a lot remains to be seen with the moves to the Big Ten and how the conference gets reconfigured into divisions and what the schedules wind up being.
I'd say that USC, Texas, and Oklahoma are clearly, from a historical standpoint, the best programs added. The thing I will say about USC, and I make this statement from time to time when arguing about their ability to compete in the Big Ten, that while Alabama has won the championships, they are the championship leader during our lifetimes. Ohio State's been, from an elite standpoint, the most consistent program in the country, winning percentage, being in championship level play almost every year. That when USC is right, when they have the right coach in play who will lock down Southern California, go elsewhere, and when they have peaked, Pete Carroll, John McKay, John Robinson, look out, maybe the most dominant program in the history of college football at its best. I think UCLA has a ton of potential. They've always been a mystery program to me. Tony knows that. I've always seen all the advantages of various things. And when the Pac-12 was a stronger conference, certainly that was in their favor in the 80s and 90s. A lot of people don't know this. There were certain years you could argue the Pac-12 was the best, or the Pac-10 at the time, the best conference in college football. It was that strong for a number of years. Oklahoma, the surprising aspect of Brent Venables' first season for me was that a defensive guru, the guy that is considered arguably the best in the business at what he does, did not take the pieces given him and at least kind of bridge to be able to get his recruits. There's this thought process there, and it's been stated by him and elsewhere that we kind of threw up our hands and we're waiting for our players to get here. And I just would have thought that he would have been able to scheme his way to a respectable defense, and they were awful. Mm-hmm. But he is recruiting extremely well, and I still have faith in his ability as a head coach, even though he has yet to do it. Texas gets in its own way. And as Tony and I have discussed, concerning Texas hires and the head coaching job and elsewhere is that school is the most political in regards to not thinking of national politics, but thinking of internally and within the state, the most driven by outside forces that get in the way of the school and the football program doing what it should be doing. And so with all the resources and everything at its fingertips, and they made the most money and revenue in football last year, second to Ohio State, they get in their own way. And much like what Tony just had to say, it's almost like they have to have a coach come in who has the resume to where people are going to trust and lay off, or who has the strong enough personality to say, this is my deal, get out of the way. Do you want to win? Then let's take it from here. And I trust me. So that I think that's your upper echelon. I'm not going to go through the rest of it. I do think that the 4 that are joining the Big 12 are super intriguing, because I think you can make a very distinct case, and we have in a number of videos and live streams made a distinct case for each one and why they would be the most likely to be competitive. And I think that case is probably best UCF long term. A lot of advantages to Florida recruiting, Orlando, NIL, Disney, alumni base is mammoth. They have money. Stadium expansion right now. I just think UCF has a lot of things going for it.
I've always said that UCF, people call, like Nebraska and stuff like that, sleeping giants. I've always said that UCF is like this growing up giant, because they started in the 80s, the school did. And they're so young. They're one of the youngest Power 5 schools I think there is. And they're just awaiting this just complete level up to being one of the good to great programs in Power 5. I think they're kind of a few years away from that, especially with Gus Malzahn and, being there in Florida where the recruiting is just so good, and being the only Big 12 team that's in there. I feel like UCF could find themselves into either the Big 10 or the SEC someday if the Big 12, doesn't stay on par with those two, which right now it doesn't look like. I think if we're being honest, it doesn't look like they probably will in 5-10 years from now.
Good stuff, JR. Appreciate you hopping on board. Had some really good stuff. I apologize for the miscommunication right out of the gate, but thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day. Thanks.
You too.
Here.
All right, Tony, let's reset here. Appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Again, the bad signal worked. I'm glad of that.
Yeah, I literally walked in 15 minutes ago from a morning at Winston-Salem with Dave Clawson and the Wake Forest football team. So the timing worked out.
Realignment, folks. I know that you're here to talk realignment. Of course, this is the Realignment Blowout show, but let's talk a little bit of football. Tony coming back from Wake Forest here. I'm curious to know your thoughts about where this team sits in the hierarchy of the ACC for this 2023 season. Of course, minus Sam Hartman, and then losing one of the best receivers in the league just a few days ago as well.
Yeah. Losing Donovan Green is a big deal because you feel for the kid. He tore his ACL in 2021, worked so hard in the off season to come back in 2022, was the second leading receiver on the team, but behind A.T. Perry. And now he's got another knee injury. It's not a torn ACL, but he had surgery over the weekend. Wake Forest puts the timeline at 3 to 5 months. It's closer to the 5 months. I think the 3 months is a range, and hopes of being able to get him back before the end of the season. It is a receiver is a position of great depth for Wake Forest this year, but still, it's a bit of a mental and emotional blow to the team as well because of what he's meant to the team. Look, Wake Forest is going to have some challenges. Dave Clawson had a good year last year, although they didn't finish particularly well. He has relied on a lot of 5th and 6th year players, using their COVID year and their red shirt. So, and he still has some. He doesn't have as many, but the depth is going to be an issue at a couple of positions, particularly the defensive line. A couple of injuries on the D line could really, rack the season. I got to be honest with you. Where do they belong in the hierarchy? When I did my ballot for the ACC rankings, I put them in the middle of the pack, expecting about a 7-5 season. Could easily go, 5-7 if they've got a couple of injuries in the wrong places. I think 7-5 is probably a ceiling for them also. They've got a relatively easy non-conference schedule. They play the typical FCS opener that Clausen insists on doing. Last year was VMI. This year it's Elon. They've got Vanderbilt again. They've got Old Dominion. They've got some tough games. I mean, they've got Florida State at home. They've got Clemson on the road. They've got Duke on the road again. They have that November 18th game, which all of Demon Deacon Nation has circled in red at South Bend against Sam Hartman and the Fighting Irish. So, and then they've got to be on the road again the next week, Thanksgiving weekend at Syracuse. So it's a relatively tough schedule once you get past the first month. And, it's cliche to say health will determine things, but they don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to health.
Wake Forest has to do a lot on the football field to garnish some attention across the conference, let alone across the nation. And they've done that at times, and putting up 40 and 45 points a game with Sam Hartman at the controls put them on people's radar because they were so fun to watch and so prolific in the passing game. And Dave Clausen, for people that are paying attention, and you don't have to be paying attention that well because he's been doing it for so long, is just developing a program way above its what's supposed to be its pay grade. Yeah. That Wake Forest, you talk about underrated. They're so underrated at times and have been under Clausen that when we talk about underrated or the best development programs, they should be at the top of that list. And it's usually, Wisconsin and Kansas State, and we go and gravitate elsewhere. But goodness,
they're too underrated to be underrated. They haven't climbed up to the underrated level yet. Look, he's got a challenge because he can't utilize the transfer portal very much. He's got an admissions department at the university that will give him grad transfers, and that's about it. You're not going to see undergrad transfers, or at least not very many, at Wake Forest. It's already the smallest school out of all the P5s in terms of student enrollment. They are next week unveiling a new football facility, practice facility, and workout facility that's been about a year and a half in the undertaking. But the money that was spent for that from the limited donor base means there's not much in the NIL bank. So look, he's got he's Sisyphus over there trying to push a boulder up a hill, and keeps rolling back on him. So I think he's happy when he can get it close to up the hill.
Tony, when we've got more time, and this is more like a May discussion, would love to really pick your brain about the UCLA program and now what you're seeing at Wake Forest, and just some of those ins and outs that maybe not the college football standard fan would be interested in, but I sure am, because my only comparison on the ground was covering Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama for 7 years in the SEC. But at 26 or 27 years old, I was just trying to put a sportscast on every night. I wasn't thinking about the big picture and comparing how those institutions work, but you're a great resource when it comes to that. But we should get to the reports of the day.
Yeah, sure.
The ACC, Stanford, SMU, they have a board meeting, do the athletic directors, on Tuesday night. That would be tonight, folks, according to the Athletic, Yahoo Sports, and others reporting. Stanford and Cal. I also don't want to exclude Cal, of course. So, how likely do you think? Let's start in the starting blocks there.
I would have a week ago. I would have said it's absurd, but I don't think. I don't think we know what absurd is anymore with realignment. Look, I think Stanford and Cal make more sense for the Big Ten, but the Big Ten seems intent on not adding any more right now, whatever right now is. And I think, look, we also have to put quotation marks around right now, because we've lost all sense of right now. Greg Sankey says we're not going to expand right now. But you can't tell me if Florida State and Clemson weren't available, or were available, that he wouldn't jump all over it. Of course he would. Absolutely would. So right now, not available. These are all relative terms. I think the ACC is grasping at straws a little bit. They are worried about their future because, and you and I have talked about this before, while the grant of rights is, treated like the tablets, being carried by Moses, it's there are flaws in it. Not many, one or two, and they are likely to be the subject of litigation in the next year, mostly probably from Florida State. I think that Jim Phillips is in a position of he's trying to shore up, his wagons around the conference campfire as best he can, not knowing what's in front of him. Look, there's been a lot of discussion about Florida State. How do they get out? Can they get out? They're meeting with JP Morgan. And the whole point of that is Florida State can pay the $120 million exit fee. It's the loss of the TV right revenue that would stay with the conference for 6 home games per year through 36, sorry. And can we somehow find a way to $300 million in revenue that we can basically sit on in order to ride through that storm? But there's something someone else brought to my attention, which I think is probably even more viable. And it's a term that, bear with me one second because it's important that I get it right. Choice of law. That term is likely to be important. There is no choice of law terminology in the grant of rights. And you and I both know that I have a copy of the grant of rights, the latest verse, sitting in my desk. And there is nothing covering choice of law. What that means is the state of Florida, the legislature, the politicians could protect Florida State from breach of contract lawsuits. It is what the Texas legislature did to cover off Texas Tech in the Mike Leach lawsuit. They could do it so that it would basically make it that you want out, you're going to get sued for breach of contract. However, there is nothing in the grant of rights that demands arbitration, mediation, and the choice of law means there is no given venue already determined for lawsuits. So you would have to sue them because they are the defendant. In that case, you would have to sue them in the state of Florida. The Florida State legislature could protect them in the choice of law matter. So that is something that would allow them to, it's going to take a year to litigate, but it's probably a lot less expensive than using all of your assets as collateral on a $300 million front from JP Morgan.
So from a football standpoint, for as crazy as most of these moves have been recently, or would have been deemed crazy 3 years ago, 5 years ago, there's been a connection. There's at least been a connection of sorts. I've reviewed and posted videos, Washington's history against the Big Ten, Oregon, the Arizona schools, and so forth, that have, at least on some level of frequency, have scheduled games. And then because of the postseason structure, the leagues have met in postseason play, Rose Bowls and so forth, even going through the Arizona schools again and the Big 12 editions, because of the geography, they've again periodically played games against each other. And there's some history of them having a history against various teams in the league. Stanford, I'm coming up with, off the top of my head, bowl games against North Carolina and Pitt about 5 years ago, back to back. But obviously those were not relationships that were built through going out there to schedule a home and home series. And for as in concert as Stanford is on an academic level with Virginia, North Carolina, and others, Duke, there just is no football history there between the conference and the school. Then we've got SMU, who would just be completely isolated in Dallas. And the draw there is the television market. I guess that's why
The draw there is money.
Texas recruiting.
The draw there is money. SMU, if the reports are true, and I've seen it in 3 different places, look, SMU is one of the wealthiest schools in anywhere west of the Mississippi. SMU, if this is true, and I believe the sources who confirmed this, SMU has agreed to play for free for 2 years. No TV revenue. They're not going to take a chunk out of the ACC contract because they can afford it. SMU just wants to be a Power 5 school. They just want to be in a P5 conference, and it matters that much to them because their chances of being an add-on somewhere are dwindling. They're not getting bigger even through all of this because certain conferences say they're done. If the ACC is going to look at them, part of that is the money. Playing for free for all intents and purposes, with no money coming out of the TV contract. The endowments for SMU are huge. They are so well funded. They're doing an expansion on their stadium. It would still be the second smallest stadium in the conference. It would beat Wake Forest by a little bit. But I think that's part of the draw. Look, because there is no connection. And like you said, the connection with Stanford and the ACC is limited. The connection with Cal and the ACC is non-existent because Cal doesn't even make bowl games to play against these other schools. There is no significant history of the ACC playing teams on the West Coast at all, anywhere in football, in anyone's recent memory. But again, I think Jim Phillips is just trying to make sure that, what is the phrase? He's not fiddling while Rome burns, or however that goes. That he's trying to be proactive. He's got the top portion, the top third, maybe fourth of his conference is not happy with revenue, with other things. And he's just, he has a need. He's seen a need to be active, to be out there having conversations and meeting with people. One thing to remember, it takes a 75% approval vote for the ACC from their membership to add in a new school. 75%. There are schools which you and I have talked about before. I'm not going to name names because they're sources, that have told me off the record. There are schools that will withhold their vote as hostage because they want to reopen conversation on the grant of rights. So no matter what, it's not going to be a clean process. And I apologize for the noise if you hear it. There's construction going on next door.
Not at all. Not picking up anything there.
Okay.
So wild idea here. We've already got a connection, a strong one between Notre Dame and the ACC, of course, in every other sport. They're a full-fledged member. It's us football heads seem to sometimes discount that, lessen the significance of that because they're not a member in football. But to the degree that they've signed a contract to play 5 and 6 games per year against the ACC, Stanford, Notre Dame, there's a connection there. Notre Dame just played a series with Cal. And one of those games was just this past season. And then, I wonder if the ACC could possibly make some kind of play for Notre Dame, go back to the negotiating table with ESPN and try to pump them for some more money and say, we could make all this happen. Notre Dame won't. We can prevent them from going to the Big Ten if you pony up some money and being taken away for Fox, CBS, and NBC to show. We keep Notre Dame in-house, then we've got a better shot of keeping together Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and others.
Look, that makes a lot of sense. But if I'm Notre Dame, I'm still sitting out and waiting because, I'm not into sharing my TV revenue with anybody right now because I don't have to. I think, and let's remember also who's coming in as the new Big Ten commissioner, the former president of NBC Sports, who got Notre Dame, just renewed Notre Dame on their NBC contract. So I think there's, some of the incestuous relationships will play out a little bit as well. If I'm Notre Dame, I don't go to a conference until I miss out on the playoffs, the expanded playoffs. I'm sitting at, we'll just say 8-4, and some third place SEC team at 8-4 gets in ahead of me. I'm sitting tight. Now, if I'm Jim Phillips, yeah, I'm making calls to Notre Dame, every other day. If I'm Notre Dame, I'm not making that move.
Another somewhat crazy thought would be Florida State is taking the initiative. They're the ones at the forefront of possible litigation.
Mm-hmm.
They're the most public in their discontentment with the ACC. Okay, we know that others are right there as well, the ones making the money, of course, for the league and not getting what they deem to be their fair share. So we also know that the grant of rights could be shaken by an 8-team group, 8-school group that would all agree. But we also know, my guess there is what the challenge and adversity there is, there aren't 8 schools that would have a safe landing spot elsewhere. That's to correct. Say, we want to be in on this because correct. We can go to the Big Ten or the SEC. There's only maybe 4 plus possibly. Wonder if a Florida State could strike a deal that we can get out from under a lot of this financial burden of trying to pay our way out of this, and we can bring a school or 2 with us. You bring along a lesser school, whoever the most haves of the have-nots are, and you bring them along to a Big Ten or an SEC, and they come as a deal, a package deal.
Yeah, look, I think, Rick McCullough, the president of Florida State, I think that he would be wise to not be out there on his own so much. And maybe he's not. Maybe just publicly it seems like he is. But to be lobbying some of his other conference teams and talking about working together in unison as a package, because you're right. Other than, right now, nobody has another home to go to. There is no outreach from another conference for Clemson or Florida State. But as we said when I started this, that's as of right now. In 3 hours, that could change. The long history of the Pac-12 unraveled in about 72 hours. So we know things can move quickly. But it is, so he would do well to garner a little bit of good faith from the other members of his conference, or at least some of them, because if he is made available, if Clemson is made available, I do think Greg Sankey is going to take that on, but he would do well to stop acting out on his own so much.
Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. We got Tony Siracusa on the line. Last word on college football. What is going on with Last Word these days?
Well, as you can this is because everyone's in training camp. We have, obviously, our content is ramped up considerably. 5-6 fresh stories per day, every day going forward through Christmas, honestly. So, my staff knows, we don't walk at this point. We run full speed. If you needed a vacation, you should have taken it already. Because there's no such thing as a vacation during college football season. So, and just, following up on a lot of, like I said, these different types of rumors, SMU, Stanford, whatever the case may be. As you and I know, it's been a whirlwind, for the past 2 weeks with all of this. It's interesting. I got to throw this in. It's interesting. The outpouring of emotion and looking back on the good old days of college football, and look, I'm one of those old guys. I get it. But we've been doing this for 40 years. Conference realignment. This just seems more drastic because an entire conference unraveled within a week or two, and because we've got 4 West Coast schools that are going to play in what is inherently a Midwest-driven conference. But look, and we've talked about this, 1984, United States Supreme Court in NCAA versus Oklahoma Board of Trustees ruled that the NCAA was an antitrust violation if it was controlling the TV contracts. It had to go to the conferences and the schools. And look, from that point on, we're sitting here talking about the ACC. The ACC wouldn't look anything like it does right now if it hadn't raided the Big East and took Miami and Syracuse and Boston College. The Big 12, well, it was the Big 8. And then it went and raided the Southwest Conference and became the Big 12. And the SEC took Arkansas out of the Southwest Conference. The Pac-8, basically pillaged what there was on the high end of the Pacific Coast Conference. And then later on, it would raid the WAC for the Arizona schools, and it would go out and get Colorado and Utah. Heck, Colorado is basically going home in all of this realignment. This is how these conferences have operated for 40 years. It's been driven by TV. It's been driven by the revenue dollars as to who can have the biggest lineup, the best lineup, the most impactful lineup. It just seems a little harsher right now because the Pac-12 went into such meltdown mode with Kliavkoff, completely mismanaging the TV deal for the Pac-12. I mean, once we got a hold of the actual terms, we knew when we were on last week, the broad strokes of the Apple deal. And now that we see the real details, because it's been leaked out by some of the schools, man, what an awful, awful, awful option this was. Apple was insisting that there could be no linear partner. So he was hamstrung. I take the 23 million projected, not guaranteed, based on subscriptions. And I have to let go of, anyone else who wants to come in that's a linear TV partner. So he put himself into a corner. The Pac-12 is suffering as a result. There is no conceivable way, as much as Kliavkoff wants to talk about, he's trying to shore up, some other options. Look, I was management at a radio station that went into bankruptcy conservatorship at one point. All right. And because we were management, we had to stay till the last day. I know very well what Kliavkoff is doing because it's what I was doing, sitting in my office, watching television and polishing up my resume. That's what George is doing about right now. Because there are no options. If you don't have a TV deal, let's just say San Diego State, you can't get San Diego State to leave its conference with a $34 million buyout when you don't even have a TV contract to offer them to join your conference. It doesn't work that way. Those four schools, if they stay together, wind up in the Mountain West with, Gloria Nevarez running the show, because she probably should have been the Pac-12 commissioner instead of Kliavkoff anyway. So, but my point being, we've gone through decades of this. I don't know if you saw the comments yesterday from Chip Kelly at the end of UCLA practice. Ben Bolch from the LA Times came on record as saying he advocates college football just pulling away from the rest of college sports because the challenges are unique for football. Let them manage football. Let the schools manage the rest of the sports. There'll still be the revenue, but don't try and lump them all into the same thing. Dave Clawson has been telling me the same thing for probably 9 months, that he advocates the same type of thing. So I can see 5 years from now, there are 2, maybe 3 major conferences with all the FBS schools. And guess what? They're going to get divided up by regions. There's going to be, Super Conference 1 with all these West Coast schools playing in the West Coast, because it's the only way it can go. If you're going to build these huge conferences, you can't just stay in your vacuum of an existence. It won't work long term.
Tony Siracusa, last word on college football. I would encourage everyone to head on over there. You love college football. They do as well at Last Word on College Football, but they know some things that you don't know. So
We try.
check them out there. Last Word on College Football. Tony, thank you so much for being here.
All right, Mark, take care. Be well.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got Michelle Gardner joining us from the Arizona Republic. Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
Anytime.
I believe let's see if we're okay. We've got a bit of an echo for some reason. Hopefully that's okay, because typically we've had tons of conversations with Michelle in the past and had no issue, but we're hearing a reverb. Hopefully we can clear that up in some way. If you could tune down your speakers as much as you can while still hearing me, that may help.
Hang on. Let's try that.
Obviously, you still need to be able to hear me, but I think we're doing a little bit better there.
Is that better?
I believe so. How you doing, Michelle?
Trying to stay cool.
Oh, well, yes. It's been, 115 forever there.
Well, we had 31 straight days of 110 or higher, and it was closer to 120 than 110. It's been brutal. And they're practicing outside. I give all the credit to these players. He's not taking them in the bubble. They're practicing outside.
And what kind of extra precautions are being taken?
Well, they do practice early. I mean, 9 o'clock, it's still hot, but they're hydrating. And the other day he even brought an ice cream truck on the field after practice, which was, I have to admit. So, but anyway.
All this realignment. Okay, I'm going to start with this, Michelle. Obviously, each school has to, whether they claim solidarity or not, and many of the Pac-12 schools had been for months and months and months. It's not looked good on the negotiations front for quite some time. And at some point, you have to save yourself. You have to look for the best deal, and you have to look for the stability. But do you believe that Arizona State really wanted to make this move? There's a lot of talk that they were one school in the Pac-12 that really did not want to leave.
No, I mean, Dr. Crow and Ray Anderson have been loyal, and I've been saying it a lot. To a fault, they've been loyal. So no, they didn't want to do this. And even as recently as May, when I talked to Ray Anderson about a myriad of subjects, he said he had not talked to the Big 12, and he fully intended on staying part of the Pac-12, and he thought the Pac-12 would remain intact. And I really believe he believed that at the time. But as the dominoes fell, they really didn't have a choice. I think the Colorado move started the ball rolling, because not that Colorado's a great shaker in the world of college football, but their departure kind of gave an indication that they didn't have faith in this leadership to have a stable viability moving forward. So I think the Colorado move started it, and that's when ASU probably had to start thinking more seriously about it. And obviously over the last week after that, it got to the point where they literally did not have a choice.
I'm thinking through recent football history, and Arizona State has typically only run into Big 12 teams in postseason play. They played Texas Tech in a bowl game about 20 years ago. They've played, a few different teams in the Big 12 here and there. I'm thinking of an Oklahoma State series just here in the last couple of years. They played them home and home, of course. But
they play them this year, actually. They play them here.
Oh, they played them last year and then this year.
Yes, they played them, at Stillwater last year, here this year.
But not a ton of connection there. But fortunately for Arizona State and those people that care about football and care about what feels right or what seems to be right culturally, and when I say culturally, I mean in a football sense, at least the Territorial Cup comes along, and some familiar faces, at least in the Pac-12, come with ASU.
Right. And they've also played BYU in the past. So, I think that we're looking at the way this is going to set up. I think you're going to have the two divisions. You're going to have two 8-team divisions. And I think last year the Big 12 played 8 conference games. So basically you're looking at playing your 7 teams in your division. So I think if you're ASU, that's Colorado, obviously Arizona, the Utahs, and whoever else you bring along to that side. And then really you'd only have one other game where you'd be flying across the country farther. It's not like, you know, people that are saying it's increased travel. Yeah, it is a little bit, but it's still, you know, Arizona to Seattle is not, that's a good 3 hours. So it's not like you're going to be making multiple trips a year. It's not like you're going to be playing at Central Florida, at Cincinnati, at, you know, West Virginia, all in the same year. That's not going to happen. I think where it's going to be interesting is more in the minor sports where you have more frequent trips.
Yeah, I would think that they would structure the conference in such a way to keep things as regionalized as possible and only make those, whether that's a pod system, whether that's an east-west, whatever it is. But, you know, again, going back to the fit of Arizona State football in the Big 12, the Pac-12, more than any other conference through previous realignment, has stayed within its geography. You know, a lot of people thought Utah and Colorado was a bit of a stretch, and it seemed like that 10 years ago, but now it seems very fit to what the Pac-12 is, but it's strictly a West Coast conference and has been for decades. And now Arizona State, sure, geographically, in the way we think about things now, they've been so stretched in every other conference. Arizona State actually seems like a decent fit geographically to the Big 12, but it's still just a huge, from coming from a West Coast conference and having a long stay going back to 1978, and now looking at being in the Big 12, where, you know, that's a Plains, that's a Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Texas, Oklahoma centered conference, and just, you know, the fit athletically, and your thoughts about the fit from an institutional, cultural, political standpoint.
You know, I think newness is always difficult, so it's probably going to take some getting used to. You look across the board at the sports, and I think it's actually going to be a little bit interesting. Basketball, men's basketball is going to be off the charts ridiculous, obviously. I think from a wrestling, ASU's got a very top-notch wrestling program, and the Big 12 is great in wrestling. The Pac-12 doesn't really have wrestling. I mean, 3 teams in the Pac-12 have wrestling. So, you know, I think it depends really on the sport that you're looking at. But I think there's definitely some things to get excited about. But it's an interesting fit. But, I mean, I don't know if the Pac-12 is obviously didn't have any sustainability. There's really no other place to put ASU. I mean, they don't really fit anywhere else, I don't think.
Oh, not at all. Absolutely. And like you said off the top, survival was everything. And not just survival. You know, there are the Oregon States and the Washington States out there, and they're going to survive as a football program somewhere, but they may not have a seat at the big boy table, unfortunately for them, where Arizona State at least was able to secure that in a conference that, sure, it's certainly a notch below the SEC or the Big Ten, or you could say several notches, but it's a fortified league that's stabilized itself, that's gobbling up territory all over the place, and has very much stabilized itself. And, you know, speak to the improvement, increase in Arizona high school football, because I don't know that that's really nationally known, where Arizona has become a really good state in terms of developing high school football talent.
It has. And in fact, Kenny Dillingham, and obviously he's a native, he's from here. He's an Arizona guy, and he's kind of made it his mission to get more Arizona players to stay at home. And even if you look at the guys he got out of the transfer portal, a lot of them are guys with roots in Arizona. His coaching staff, the majority of his coaching staff has roots in Arizona. So he's really trying to keep those guys here. And I'm actually writing a story for tomorrow about him getting players out of Texas, and they've got 6 recruits from their next cycle out of Texas. That was not by accident. And they just got over the weekend 2 recruits from Texas for the 2025 signing class. That's not by accident. So Kenny's got a good grip on what he needs to do, and he knows he can't stray from Arizona. He wants to keep Arizona and wants to keep California. but he also knows he needs to have a footprint in Texas. So, when you look at this from a fit, and we're talking about some of the other poor souls, we don't know what's going to happen to them. And I know there's been talk about Stanford and Cal going to the ACC, and I'm going, what? Like, to me, that makes no sense. Stanford, I think, is better off as an independent, but Cal is cash strapped to begin with. Now you're telling me you're going to put them in the ACC and they're going to travel across country for every game? I don't see that happening at all.
Yeah, we'll see what Cal's priorities are if they want to play in a major conference and a Power 5 conference, and if football is the most important, which it is for everyone else, but Cal is not necessarily there. They're a very strong Olympic sports program, as obviously Stanford is at the top of that list, but they've had a viable, successful football program, certainly more recently, where you could see Stanford having more choices there and being able to be independent and piece together a schedule with service academies and with Notre Dame and with their connections on the West Coast a little bit more than Cal. But like you say, Cal is cash strapped, and certainly the football program is not in a strong position right now. But speaking of which, two other things I'd like to hit you with is just this Arizona State football program for 2023. And we know that they've got a lot to turn around. Kenny Dillingham's only 32 years old. He comes in. Has
33.
33. Did he turn 33?
33 now.
Got some gray hairs peeking out now, I guess. But we've discussed this, just his different approach to what you've seen in the past, but they're coming off a 3-9. Of course, this is going to be a honeymoon year for him in a sense, for anybody reasonable, not expecting much. But, what are some of the highlights of this particular team that's going to hit the field in 3 weeks?
Well, the biggest thing is we need to find out who the quarterback's going to be. Trenton Bourget, I think through the spring, not even a close conversation. Drew Pine, the transfer from Notre Dame, has played really well in the last week, and he's got a much stronger arm than him. So I think now we've got a race, and we're going to see where that is headed. The one thing that I'm seeing, though, is that Kenny Dillingham is trying to set a tone. So he kicked 2 players off the team this week. One of them was going to be a starter, and one of them was a starter in a position of need. And he basically said, you need to be a good person. We want good people in this program. I want kids on this team that I would trust to babysit for my children. Like, he is setting a tone right away. And, and like I said, the one guy was Juwan Mitchell, a transfer from Tennessee. He was going to be a starter. There was a little bit of a minor thing in practice over the weekend, and I don't know if there was anything else before that, maybe behind closed doors that preceded things. The other player that was removed was a backup corner who had a penchant for being late to practice last year. So I think that he's kind of set a tone that it's my way or the highway, and you kind of have to, he said it's about culture and fit, and you've got to do that right out of the gate. And yesterday, he got on the team at the end of practice, just jumped on them. We were waiting for him to come off the field and talk to us. He had them gathered at midfield and went off on them. And we asked, what was that about? And he said, complaining and whining. He said, that's loser mentality. You don't whine. You line up and you kick the butt of the guy in front of you. Whining is for losers. So, I mean, he's trying to set the tone here. And, there are a lot of things he does in practice to try and break up the monotony and make it fun. So he's kind of said all along, we're going to have the most fun that you've ever had, but you're also going to work very hard. So I think he's trying to lay the groundwork right now.
We've done a series of videos where we've looked at these schools and their football success against their new conference. So we looked at Arizona State. They've done favorably against their would have been mostly postseason matchups against Big 12 teams. And then obviously the 3 that are coming with them, we've looked at that. 23-17 comes to mind in regards to their numbers against both the 3 schools coming with them and against their new teams that they're going to be competing against in the Big 12 in the last 20 years. And people would be surprised, 6-5 against Utah in the 11 years that the Utes have been part of the Pac-12, and obviously the Utes have won the more recent games, but brings to mind for me when I think Arizona State football in the last 40 plus years since I've been watching, the large stretches of this program have been 7-5, 8-4, going to decent bowl games. There have been some peaks. Of course, they came within a whisker of a national championship in 1996. There have been a few valleys, but very few. How well do you think Arizona State is equipped to compete in its new conference?
Well, when you look at the Pac-12 this year, I think the Pac-12, as much as, it's we're talking about its destruction now, the Pac-12 is set up to have a pretty good year with 5 teams ranked, I believe. And you look at the quarterbacks in the Pac-12. So I think the Pac-12 is pretty darn good this year. And I think the Big 12 is kind of ripe for the picking right now. I mean, TCU's had some recent success, but obviously Texas and Oklahoma are on their way out. So I don't know that there's this juggernaut program in there. I think I think they can compete. I think it's really going to be a very balanced conference once ASU and the likes get in there. So I think that, maybe, I don't want to say it's a step down. I hate to say that, but you look at the way the Pac-12 is, and some of the powers like a USC and Oregon that they're just growing money basically. And Utah has established what they have. So maybe the Big 12 is better. Maybe they can compete faster for a Big 12 title than they would ever in the Pac-12.
I agree. The Big 12 has fortified itself in volume with numbers, with second and third tier programs. There is no elite program. There's no program there that's won a national championship in forever. So I would agree with that. Last thing, Michelle, and you can only kind of conjecture about what the feel and the vibe's going to be, but before all this turmoil of the last couple of weeks, I was thinking the USC-UCLA game is going to be really odd, eerie, strange this year as this kind of marquee centerpiece game of the Pac-12 every year, the most recognizable rivalry, it could be argued, and they're going to be playing their final game in the Pac-12 before they move on. Now it's the entire conference. I've got to think the month of November is going to be very eerie as we contemplate, okay, this is going to be the last matchup of these two teams. This has been a long-standing series, but that's, this league's coming to a close after 100+ years.
I agree. And the whole feel of the Pac-12 is so different than the feel of the Big 12. I mean, the one thing I'm looking forward to is the passion of the fan bases. I mean, the Big 12's got some fan bases that are so passionate about their teams, as opposed to the Pac-12, where, you got a couple schools that are kind of all in, but you go to a lot of schools and there's no feel whatsoever, as far as a fan base. And maybe it's just a whole different vibe of the area too, but I'm kind of looking forward to that. I'm not looking forward to the travel and trying to get to Waco and Lubbock and these places. And I haven't done the geography and the plane flight part of it yet, but we get spoiled trying to get to LA. It's pretty easy. And you can get to most of the Pac-12 schools, Pullman notwithstanding, you can get to them pretty easily. So I'm kind of not looking forward to the logistic part of it. But I'll be making a trip to the Rose Bowl, and it's going to be the last trip to the Rose Bowl. And being from somebody that lived in California and actually lived in Pasadena, that's going to hurt a little bit. So it's just going to be an eerie year all around, I think. And I think it's especially eerie. I feel bad for the likes of a Washington State or an Oregon State, because they literally don't. How do you go out and recruit if you're those coaches when you literally have no idea what your future is?
Yeah, and Jonathan Smith in particular has done such a great job there.
Yes.
And where he could have gone somewhere else, but obviously he is an alum and a quarterback and been tied to Oregon State, and it's going to be kind of intriguing to see whether he hangs on there or just the pull of a higher profile job is going to be even more stark compared to his situation now. Michelle Gardner, Arizona Republic. You see her Twitter handle there on the banner, folks. Great follow, Michelle Gardner, Arizona Republic. Anything in particular, Michelle, that we need to know about that you're working on?
You know what? It's so funny because this whole Pac-12, Big 12 debacle, we've gotten like 40,000 page views in like 4 days. It's like, and the administrations keep saying more and more and more, and I've got to get ready for a football season. So, it's a good problem to have because people are interested. So I hope that it drives some fan engagement this season because it makes it a whole lot more fun.
Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right. Michelle Gardner, Arizona Republic, has joined us on a regular basis throughout the years to talk Arizona State football. And of course, ASU ticketed for the Big 12 here in 2024. Let's reset here. It's the voice of college football. It's our Realignment Blowout show. We have sent out requests for Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, Stanford writers. We'll see who shows up. We apologize off the top. We were responding to a few other things as we were hurrying for our show here, but appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football. And again, the big news and reports today, the ACC athletic directors meeting tonight to discuss Stanford, Cal, SMU as well. We'll discuss it here at the Voice of College Football and did with Tony Siracusa. So if you're behind on the live stream, check out the earlier conversation with Tony, and we will go back to the phone lines. We got Chris on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, sir. Oh, all right. We had one call. We do not have that call now. So the lines are wide open. I will go to the comments section. We do have a few others who will be stopping by. So let's again get to where we stand on the reports of the day. Just got to wake up the laptop. Here we go. From The Athletic and Nicole Auerbach. So in addition to its ongoing exploration of adding Stanford and Cal, wow. Stanford in the ACC, again, Virginia, North Carolina, Duke, prominent schools and others, connection there in terms of playing on the field. Remember that Mitch Trubisky versus Stanford game in the Sun Bowl? That was 2017, where that Stanford defensive end saved the game with a 2-point conversion sack. The one that was drafted number 2 in the NFL draft by the San Francisco 49ers. And then the very next season, Stanford and Pitt got together. It was the Kenny Pickett Pitt team that lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game and eventually finished at 7-7. That was in 2018. They lost to a Stanford team in the Sun Bowl 14-13. So once again, the report here, Stanford, Cal. I cannot think of any Cal games against the ACC off the top of my head. I believe they did have a home and home with North Carolina here in the last 5 to 10 years. But that's about it with Cal. Those are the 2 games I can think of with Stanford. While there's a lot of school, Solomon Thomas, thank you so much for that. Solomon Thomas, that's who I was thinking of. Yeah, number 2 pick in the draft to San Francisco, saved the Sun Bowl for Stanford in that game against North Carolina. That if we were looking at, let's say, Oregon or USC or UCLA, they have fairly consistently traveled across country to take on ACC teams and have scheduled those games. Not frequently, because if you think about the schedule of a Pac-12 team, they only have 3 non-conference games. You're going to schedule an FCS or a group of 5 and probably 2, so you only have 1 game. And they typically stay close to the area, scheduling the likes of a Big 12 team or a BYU or a Mountain West. And then, of course, the USC Notre Dame series. So there aren't that many opportunities to be scheduling ACC teams as it is, but at least UCLA, Oregon, they've gone cross country. They have taken on the likes of a Virginia cross country, and USC had a series with Boston College about 10 years ago. And there's been a few other games we could discuss between those schools. But Stanford, can't think of any. They went to UCF about 5 years ago. They went to Northwestern about 10 years ago with Christian McCaffrey, but not to the ACC. But again, this meeting tonight, where we have, again, reported by The Athletic and Yahoo Sports, SMU will be discussed at the meeting of athletic directors. So this is a first step. Don't expect anything to be decided tonight. It could be decided by the athletic directors, but they've got to then go to their bosses and move the topic up the chain. ACC athletic directors met on Monday, followed by league presidents on Tuesday. And that was strictly about Stanford and Cal. Now they're looking at SMU. SMU, as Tony talked about, a lot of money there. Big TV market that I don't think is really an impact at this point. Maybe if they're in the ACC, it would be of higher value. And of course, the Pac-12. There will be volumes of books, articles, maybe a documentary. There should be a documentary immediately in the works right now, a 30 for 30 at ESPN on the demise of the Pac-12. That will be fascinating if that's truly uncovered accurately. Just weeks ago, the Pac-12 was courting SMU and San Diego State, or I should have said it maybe the other way around. Those schools wanted to be in the Pac-12. Yes, the demise of the Pac-12, that's a 30 for 30 that of epic proportions right there. All right. Welcome into the voice of college football. Chris, are you going to stay with us this time?
Well, I don't know. I think I disconnected myself. I don't
That's
think
all right. No problem.
I have a question, Mark. You talk about SMU. They're geographically that's kind of Central Texas, right? Or is it North Central?
Well, they're in Dallas, so they're in pretty much basically in the middle of the state. Somewhat, yeah. They're generally in the middle of the state. I know somebody's going to jump in the chat and tell me exactly where they are, but they're about 2 to 3 hours from Houston, which is on the far eastern side of the state. So they're close to the middle.
I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing here. What do you think? Maybe do you think they'd be a good fit geographically for CUSA, or is that not close enough to the? I'm just kind of thinking in terms of geography. Do you think?
Yeah, I know that you like to make all this fit geographically, and I do too. I'm with you on that conversation, Chris. Believe me on that one, but we're way past that.
Uh-huh.
So if you're going to talk about what you believe should happen, we can discuss that. And yes, SMU is no fit geographically, obviously, for the ACC. But Conference USA, that's kind of scattered all about at this point as well.
Well, potential realignment, I guess. I'm thinking more in terms of what a potential realignment might mean for these other conferences that aren't maybe being thought about. CUSA, I think they're including several additional. Is it Kennesaw State? I think was one of them. Maybe that.
Yes.
They're okay. Well, they're going to get themselves up to back to where they're 9 or 10 teams. So, why not add maybe a Southern Methodist, maybe even a Temple? I mean, do those not fit with your? That's not a good geographical fit maybe for either team, or is that more things go into it besides just geography then?
Well, again, here with Conference USA, it's basically settled into a southeastern mid-Atlantic. So you've got Florida International, Jacksonville State, Liberty, Louisiana Tech, Middle Tennessee, and Western Kentucky. So those are southern states. Right. And then you've got UTEP and New Mexico State all the way on the other side of the country.
Yeah. Well, no,
so from that standpoint, SMU would fit somewhere in the middle of all that, but it's not going to happen.
Well, I guess my question mark, it's not, you say it's not going to happen. Maybe you're probably right. I mean, as far as that goes, but I'm just thinking, why does it have to be, let's just say, I guess you're saying what, the ACC they're going to be going to, which I don't know, whatever, but If they're a better geographical fit to CUSA, I guess I don't quite understand why they wouldn't just want to go to the CUSA if that's where they have a better, and maybe it isn't a good fit. Maybe you're right, it's not, but
Money.
well,
That's always the answer. That's why they're not going. So they're in the American Conference right now. So they're in arguably the best of the group of 5 conferences. They're not going to kick back to Conference USA. They are looking to elevate to the ACC. They wanted to go to the Pac-12, but anyway, they're looking to go to the ACC. And if they aren't able to, if that deal doesn't work out, then they're going to stay put. Why would they leave the American Conference? It's a much better conference.
Well, you want me to answer that question?
Sure.
Okay. Well, this is just my own read, which isn't maybe the right read, but I could see a potential, kind of like what we're talking about with some of these conferences. Maybe it hasn't happened yet, but this is kind of like my own little, what about maybe the American Athletic and Sunbelt kind of maybe joining together and making one conference? And then if they did that, then they'd have to let a couple teams go. So they might have to let like a Southern Methodist go just to get up to 24. I don't know if you really understand what that's all about, but 24 is a better, it's more suitable to the way that college football is structured together. If you have 24 teams, that gives you it gives you a better way to put teams together in divisions. 18 divisions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're saying makes sense in regards to, yes, there are formations of conferences from a numbers standpoint that make so much sense, that the math makes sense in terms of scheduling and dividing divisions and all that.
Right.
But conferences are not going to make decisions based on exact numbers of teams.
Well, they should probably at least consider that, because
it's under consideration, I'm sure, but they're not going to bring 2 or 3 schools on board just to hit a number. The Big Ten thrived for years with 11 schools.
Right. Well, I'm not even saying necessarily that having 24 makes things I'm sure there's difficulties no matter how many teams you have, whether it's 10, 15. You're going to have to work around the number of teams, but the one thing that 24 does, if you want me to, I don't know if you're interested in hearing it, but because I went to school, Mark, I know a little bit about how this if you have 24, what it allows you to do, you can use those 24 teams in a way that if you schedule 9 conference games, what it actually does is it allows you to have 3, if you have a tournament, which is something I guess everybody wants anyway. I think if you have a tournament with 3 8-team divisions, then you have 3 teams in the tournament. Does that make sense?
Well, it's not a great tournament if you've got 3 teams, but obviously one of them is waiting to play a championship game.
Well, I understand what you're saying. 3 isn't optimal because it's like, well, how do you work with 3? But then if you expand it out, though, if every conference does the same thing, so you have to have everybody doing the same thing. You have 6 conferences that all have 24, then that jumps it from 3 to 18.
When has everyone done the same thing?
Well, you would have to get people to
the answer is never.
Well, maybe this is one of those circumstances, though, where it might.
No, we're going in the opposite direction, Chris. These conferences they're cooperating less than they ever have. They're doing whatever they want. So each conference is going to do what they believe is best. They're not going to cooperate until maybe this happens someday. There's a mass movement to hire a commissioner or a governing body that would rule the sport and standardize everything. That's different. But that doesn't seem to be in our future because these conferences are not haphazardly, they are strategic in their moves. They're doing whatever they want, and it's hurting the sport, but helping these individual conferences. So the one thing that you said in all that, Chris, that could take place, that I would guess would be the most likely to take place, would be the conferences you mentioned, Sunbelt, Conference USA, possibly the American, as they see these mega conferences, these power conferences completely drift away from them and elevate, that they get together and they form kind of a low class power conference and consolidate their best football programs into one conference.
What
That's possible.
Why do you automatically say it's low class, though? I mean, is that
Well, of
really
course
fair?
it's low class compared to the SEC and the Big Ten
Well,
and the
okay.
Big 12.
Mountain West, low class. I mean, what do you define? I guess I'm curious what you
Okay,
mean.
what words do you want me to say, Chris,
I
to
like
make you feel
second
better
tier.
about it?
I agree. It is a second tier. I agree with that.
Yes. Well, it's actually way lower than a second tier, but if there are only 2 tiers, yes, it's the second tier.
You think it's that much difference to where it's? I mean, it is a lower tier. I'm actually agreeing with you. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying you're
Yeah,
right.
I think maybe you
Lower tier, like a second.
I think sometimes maybe you take offense to my terms, like I'm slighting these people or these universities. I'm not in any such way. I have great respect for all of these players and coaches and everyone at any level of play, but I'm just talking about the differences in level of play.
No, I agree 100%. It's like it's the second lower division. It's almost like having that's why, but that my suggestion, people didn't seem to like it, but my suggestion was rather than try to force, I don't know if they're forcing them. That's the thing I'm not really sure about. Rather than force Arizona and Colorado out, which is I kind of think what really happened, if you want my opinion. And so they really didn't have much choice. Maybe they might want to be like in a Mountain West. I mean, I know the money is important, Mark, but how much more money are they going to really make by being, I mean, the Big 12, is that really, I mean, I know that's a power conference, and they have the contracts and they have, I mean, the television, whatever else, but the football isn't going to be any better. I mean, I don't quite understand why would they want to be, I mean, they're going to be Arizona and Colorado no matter where they go. Well, why not put them like in the Mountain West? Why is that such a problem?
Okay, let's back up a couple of sentences. Did you say that you think Colorado and Arizona were forced out of the Pac-12?
Well, I think I look at it a little bit differently. No, not really forced out.
Okay.
Well,
Because they
I mean,
weren't.
pressured out. Yeah, Colorado.
No, they weren't pressured out.
You think
they
the
were-
Pac-12 really wanted to keep Colorado around? I don't think so. I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to say if they were or not, Mark, but
They pursued them 10 years ago, and they were just trying to hold together a conference. Of course, they wanted all those schools to stay. There is no Pac conference anymore.
Pac-4.
They wanted them all to stay.
There's 4. It's not really a conference, but isn't there kind of a 4-team?
Well, technically, yes, there are 4 schools in the Pac conference right now.
Right.
They're going to be playing somewhere else.
All right. So I'm gonna shift gears a little bit here. So let's say you're right about, I'm not saying you're not. So let's say you're right about 16. That means that the Big Ten is probably going to want to let 2 teams go to get down to 16, right? They're going to probably want to let I'm thinking maybe Rutgers and Maryland.
I didn't say anything about 16.
Yeah. I think they're getting to 18, but it might be so that they can get back down to 16. It's kind of what I think might be happening. And if those 2 teams, if they were to join the Atlantic Coast Conference, that would give the Atlantic Coast Conference 16.
Well, I am not, after what we've seen in college football for the last 2 years, I am not going to say that we will not see a day where a conference will kick schools out, but we have yet to see it. And I just don't see the Big Ten going in that direction. Again, I'm not saying it won't ever happen, but they're going in the opposite. They're increasing in numbers.
Well, they're either going to add or subtract. I mean, don't you think they're either going to add more teams?
Yes, and I'm 98% sure that they're going to add, not subtract.
So those four Pac-12 schools might be headed to the Big Ten then.
Well, 2 of them could be. The other 2, no.
So Washington State and Oregon State probably not.
No.
But those are good schools, though. I mean, they're good. They're good at. I mean,
they don't add value to the Big Ten.
Okay.
Yes, they're good schools that have.
Well, I mean, I
good
did
football programs.
I did a historical. I don't know if you looked at it or not, but I mean, neither one of them are exceptional. But I think they're both. I think Oregon State was like top 60 all time or close to it, and I think Washington State's top 50. I mean, you can look at that however you want, but I think that's relatively fair. I mean, that's not bad. It's not terrible. Top 16.
Absolutely.
I don't know. It kind of depends on where you want to draw the line, though, on whether, like, I know you seem to think that the Big Ten would be smart to include Florida State, and I actually kind of think that would be the worst thing they could even consider to do.
The worst thing they could do.
Florida
Why?
State. I mean, first of all, I think I'm not trying to pick on either one. I mean, I've been to Miami; it's a beautiful place. I mean, probably a great place, maybe even a great place to go to school. I don't know, but Coral Gables. But so I mean, there's a lot that would be good about it, but I think that things have shifted a little bit, Mark. I don't think it's as to where it was. If this was like 1995 or something, it'd be like, oh, great, we're getting Miami, we're getting Florida State. Really, I mean, even last year, I mean, I don't know. I guess they were good, but they weren't great. I mean, are they going to be great just because they're going to be? I mean, is that going to make them great all of a sudden just because they're going to be in the Big Ten? I mean,
you are making an evaluation strictly on football results on the field, and that's part of it.
Well, they're very good.
Florida State would be a great addition to the Big Ten for a number of reasons.
They're very good. I'm not trying to make it like they're not. They're very good. Both of them are probably very good. You know, you probably couldn't get two better schools if you want to know the truth. You probably couldn't.
Well, you could. Stanford and Notre Dame are better schools.
Well, I meant with football. I didn't mean with
football.
Yeah, I wasn't talking academics. I was talking. I'm sorry. I'm not very good at what I say sometimes. But I mean, but from limited to the athletic part of it, I think you couldn't. I mean, I even know, even with Florida State kind of being not as good as they used to be, I still think they're you're going to get a good team no matter what. But I just kind of wonder, though, with the way things are now, if there might not be as good teams that don't necessarily have to be from the ACC. Why do we have to go to the ACC? Why can't we maybe I'm not saying Tulane would be a good fit, but maybe I don't know, maybe a Memphis, maybe I don't know who else to consider, but is it limited to
Chris,
just
you're telling me that Memphis or Tulane is a better fit than Florida State in the Big Ten?
Actually, I'm not. I'm just saying if we're looking just strictly at the way that they play and the performances, I don't know. You're probably right, Mark, about it. I'm not even saying you're not, but I mean, both are outstanding. But I mean, to me, it's almost like if you want to get better, you have to bring in better schools. And Notre Dame, I mean, even Notre Dame to some extent isn't quite as, I mean, they're good, but they're not, I don't think they have the same mystique, I guess. That they used to have.
We've reached a level of absurdity here.
Notre Dame?
Yes, yeah. Notre Dame is the best chess piece on the board, and they have been for the entire time. So I don't have the time to explain why Notre Dame is a great brand and why they would be. It's even absurd for me to address that.
No, I'm not
we've
even
gotten to the point where I'm having to explain why Notre Dame is a great addition to any conference, or even Florida State, or even Miami.
Okay, well, we could say the same thing about BYU then, right?
No. They're not close.
No. Notre Dame.
No, they're not. Again, Chris, you are getting too locked in on just wins and losses and not the value of the program.
I think even like Connecticut would be a good addition.
Okay. We've gone way too far.
You don't think Connecticut has much to, you don't think they're a good addition?
Good addition to who? It depends who you're talking about. To the MAC, they'd be a great addition.
You're in Connecticut and you don't think Connecticut's any good? I mean, I'm asking you.
Any good at what? Football?
Yeah.
Well, they've been awful, and they didn't even field a football team one year. They've been so bad. Yes, they had an NFL coach come in and raise their level extraordinarily, but we're talking about the Big Ten. Okay, where we've reached absurdity when you're telling me Notre Dame's not a good ad and UConn's a good ad.
Well, I don't know that that's what I said, but if you want to twist my words to say that's what I said, that's okay. I'm just saying Notre Dame is very good, but they're not. Last year they weren't bad last year, but they weren't great last year.
Okay.
I mean,
you have to have a larger scope of thought on this.
I guess what I'm asking you, Mark, is are we taking everything into, like, Marshall beat Notre Dame? And I'm not saying that should have even happened. Maybe it was even kind of a fluke. I remember watching the game kind of thinking, well, this is kind of weird. But, but the reality is Marshall beat them. And at some point you got to kind of give them their due. So why does it have to be this one team just because they've been good for hundreds of years or whatever, and this other team maybe just for a couple seasons?
Let me explain business to you very quickly. Supply and demand. The demand for Notre Dame football on television and in stadiums is massive.
Okay.
UConn, it's next to zero.
Well, it doesn't
So
have to be
regardless of what the win-loss record is on the field, and those generally go together, there's no comparison between Notre Dame and UConn. It's an absurd conversation.
You didn't think they were good when they had Randy Edsel there?
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Again.
And I thought they
Chris,
were good after he left.
These TV executives and these school administrators, they live in a world of evaluating business, not did you win the Marshall game last year?
Well, I understand.
Chris.
Connecticut won a national championship. Come on, give them the. I don't understand why Notre Dame. Yeah, Notre Dame in the 70s. Okay, are we still in 1973 or something? I mean, I'm kind of trying to put us back where we are. I'm not saying Connecticut's a great team, but I mean, there's other teams out there that might be just as good. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
We can pick up this conversation another time because it has reached complete absurdity. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Have a good day.
I'm going to blame all of you for that conversation because nobody else called. No. Chris is welcome to call anytime. We can have that conversation, but yes. Chris is either the greatest troll who's ever been created on YouTube, or he just doesn't understand the valuation of schools and programs. When Ohio State went 6-7 in 2011, were they suddenly the 50th best program in the country? Obviously not. We can't get wrapped up in specific football games when evaluating teams and programs in a football sense, let alone in a business sense. Wow. Okay. So the intent of this show was to look at Arizona State, look at everything that's going on right now in regards to the reports of meetings involving the ACC, looking at Cal, looking at Stanford. We will post videos here in the next few days looking at how Cal and Stanford have performed against the ACC, how they would project forward playing in the ACC, and we will do the same with SMU. Can't think of a whole lot of SMU games against ACC opponents. Of course, SMU had a stint in Conference USA following its stint in the Southwest Conference that ended when the Southwest Conference ended, but they were kicked into Conference USA for about 25 years or so, until I believe 2013. They've had 10 seasons roughly in the American Conference, but SMU's ties to ACC schools on the field has been extremely limited. I'm not coming up with anything since that Dan Marino Pitt team played SMU in the Cotton Bowl in 1983. And of course, Pitt way back then was an independent and SMU was in the Southwest Conference. SMU against the ACC, if this gets decided and agreed upon and worked out, Cal and Stanford coming from the West Coast to be in what is truly the Atlantic Coast Conference, meaning that, this is the last conference left, although the SEC has pretty much stayed within its geographic footprint, that the ACC is pretty much there, although, Louisville is quite a ways from the Atlantic coast. But wow, Stanford and Cal in the ACC along with SMU. I believe that the ACC should have pursued what I suggested about 5 years ago, posted a video, you can look it up here, where I realigned college football, and I suggested that the ACC go after, you're going to laugh at one of these two, and I would too right now, but things were a bit different then. But I was looking for the ACC to go after UCF and USF at the time. So, wow, it will be interesting. This grant of rights, the grant of rights situation is right now an amped up on steroid version of what the Pac-12 media rights deal was weeks and months ago. the Pac-12 media rights deal was the point of decision, was the point of the fork in the road, is what the Pac-12 media rights deal turned out to be. And we knew it was going to be just that it was either going to solidify and hold the Pac conference together, or it was going to go the way that it's gone. We knew there would be nothing in between, or possibly a massaging of the Pac-12 going after SMU and San Diego State to help solidify the conference and plug the holes, in a sense, at least from a numbers standpoint, of the departures of USC and UCLA. So what the Pac-12 media rights deal was in this last phase of realignment, in breaking the dam and allowing the Big 12 to scarf up 4 schools and the other 2 to go to the Big 10, and the demise and decline and complete dissolution of the Pac conference. The next, what I would expect right now, the most obvious next linchpin in all this that will cause major shifts, is how this grant of rights is going to be dealt with, and how binding it is versus how flexible or adaptable, or how it can be attacked and dismantled. So Tony took us through one way in which Florida State has a bit of a legal path. So go back and check out the conversation we had with Tony. There's just the sheer buyout of the grant of rights by a Florida State, let's say. We'll take them as an example, that is being reported somewhere between $500 and $700 million. The number that I remember seeing that was the most specific was $591 million to buy out Florida State and get them completely out of the grant of rights. That number is reduced each and every year. And I would think that that number would have been calculated post 2023, looking at getting Florida State out by 2024. And then, of course, as I brought up to Tony, let's not consider this necessarily a harebrained scheme or proposal on my part, but let's say Florida State is looking at a legal, they are looking at a legal mountain to climb. Let's say that they don't believe that they can get there and the financial climb is too much. Because unless they can raise that kind of money, the Big Ten money or the SEC money is so much more substantial than what they're being paid in the ACC. But to pay out of that grant of rights, it's not that much of a difference. It's 2.5 to 1. It's 80 million versus 30 million, roughly 80 versus 35. But how about the idea that I served up to Tony, which is Notre Dame's already a member of the ACC and all these other sports, and they already have an agreement, and this would be an interesting part in all this to look up, would be the agreement that Notre Dame has in football with the ACC and how long they are contracted with the ACC. Maybe that's whatever the contract of the other sports is, probably the same length of time as Notre Dame's contract is probably all packaged together. Their membership in all the, 14 other sports, whatever the number is, and then the football contract to play 5 or 6 ACC opponents. So if you can bring in Stanford and Cal and SMU, you sweeten the pot for Notre Dame. You go back to ESPN and say, do you want Notre Dame to be under the control of Fox, CBS, NBC as a member of the Big Ten? Or do we want to keep Notre Dame along with these 3 other schools? We've bolstered the value of the ACC. If we can find more money for these schools, then we solidify the ACC with Stanford, Cal, SMU, and Notre Dame. maybe that's the ACC's narrow path to get back to not just survival, but relevance. I am going to break a standard rule, which is only one phone call per show, but we don't have any other callers on the line. So we've got about, 242 on the line, but nobody wants to call me. So we will keep babbling on about realignment, but we do have a call coming in from our guy, JR here.
Hey, Mark, normally I wouldn't have called again, but you said you didn't have any calls, so I figured I'd give it a
Sure.
shot. So I was just curious on your thoughts of the Gene Smith announcement today that he's retiring and how that might affect realignment. I know that's not exactly the Arizona Stanford stuff we've been talking about, but if I remember correctly, he was one of the ones that was kind of advocating for football to kind of break away from the NCAA and kind of start their own thing, stuff that you've talked about. And I was wondering, one, what do you think about Gene Smith retiring? How will that affect it? And two, do you think any other athletic directors will kind of pick that up and march on with it after Gene's gone?
Well, I got to say, I've been involved in so many other things during my entire day, whether that's been trying to round up guests for this show or personal stuff and so forth and so on. I didn't even know that news. So you were delivering that news to me.
Yeah, he announced, I think,
Smith
about
is
4 hours ago
retirement.
at a press
Okay.
conference that he was retiring in June of next year.
Okay. So I don't, in principle, like the idea of football splitting away from the other sports, but there's a difference between reality and practicality and principle. It's almost like I don't like what NIL and the transfer portal is doing to college football, but I agree with it in principle. And I agree that those student athletes should have those rights and freedoms and they should be able to make money like any other American, but it's not having a good impact on the sport. So yes, football, especially with the NIL component, has become so much different than the other sports. It's different from the other sports in terms of the size and scope of the magnitude of the notoriety and the publicity and the exposure, which obviously then leads to money. And then also because of, the massive business that it is, but it's also different in the number of games that are being played. We even see this talked about in trying to integrate, let's say, for example, USC and UCLA into the Big Ten, and the scheduling challenges for the sports that play masses of games, play 40 and 50 and 60 games in baseball, let's say, or 25 or 30 in basketball versus a football schedule. And they're very different challenges. And so to require a Rutgers softball player to have to, when there are so many viable teams that they could be playing in their area, UConn, Syracuse, and so many lower division teams that are good enough at softball to play, but could play a regional schedule. And as well as I do that teams in the north that play baseball and softball have to travel to California or down south at the beginning of their schedule anyway. You still have that nice trip to go play in one of those locales, but then you play locally and you're not making these whirlwind trips to UCLA and USC and Washington and Oregon to play a softball series that 400 people are going to watch. And it's taxing on the student athletes. It doesn't bring revenue. It's just senseless. It takes them away from their studies. It takes them away from their ability just to be a student and have friends and be on campus. And so,
I
think it makes total
soccer
sense.
player in college, and we never had to travel much more than a few states away. So when I see the Oregon softball players talking about like, oh, this is hard on us, and I do sympathize with them. However, we also traveled to Florida one year from Kentucky, and that was kind of nice. So doing it one time was really nice. But
Exactly.
I agree with you. If it was every single time, that would be really, really difficult.
Yeah, I think and every person's different, but for the average person, I would think there's a benefit, there's a pleasure in taking one big trip during your season. If you're a softball player in Connecticut and going to Florida for a few weeks in February and playing, and that would be nice. But yeah, this is an every week thing, traveling all over the country. It's just senseless. It just doesn't make any practical sense. Now, in terms of Gene Smith, I would really love to sit down with Gene Smith and in a, whether it was a private conversation that no one ever saw or it was a one-on-one, and maybe I'll reach out and try to get that. The question that I would have to ask him is about the decision to play the Gator Bowl in 2011 and not self-imposed sanctions that season, hoping that the NCAA would, maybe add to it a little bit, but then, clear them to play when he had arguably the best coach in America coming on board, and they had a dead end 6-6 season that everyone just wanted to put in the rearview mirror. That decision to make a couple $1 million to play a bowl game, when that's like the basement of expectations at Ohio State, and then they turn in this 12-0 season the next year that would have resulted in playing in the BCS championship game. They would have had to win the Big Ten championship game, but that decision has always just been, I just don't know what the justification for it was.
Yeah, I'm an Ohio State fan too, so I vividly remember 2011 and thinking through all of that and the pain of going to the Gator Bowl, because the next year you had Urban Meyer, 12-0, and you saw Notre Dame and Alabama, and I couldn't even watch the Alabama Notre Dame game in 2012 because I just kept thinking to myself that should be Ohio State, and that could have been.
Well, it actually would have been Notre Dame and Ohio State.
Yeah,
so
that's what
Alabama was the better team. I'm sorry, maybe I misinterpreted.
No, that's what I meant. If I didn't, that I'm thinking to myself the entire time, like, this should be Notre Dame and Ohio State playing, and if we just wouldn't have gone to that, stupid Gator Bowl or whatever decision was made before. Ohio State fans like to say whoever we're playing in the national championship, we're going to win, and they say the same thing about TCU last year if we beat Georgia. But I think have a pretty good shot of winning that game. Certainly better than playing Florida in, what was it, 2006 or 2007? I think that was 2006.
Yeah. So Gene Smith obviously has done a tremendous job at Ohio State. He's running the largest athletic department in the country, and by the financial numbers, the largest football program in the country, and creating the greatest revenue and all that. So he's done a great job. I don't want to take that away from him. His predecessor set him up well as well. But again, when you measure risk and reward, and that's kind of where your starting point is to any major decision, is measuring, okay, what's the greatest risk we're taking versus how could this benefit us? And then what's most likely going to happen? The greatest risk that you take is you don't play in the Gator Bowl, and the Big Ten doesn't make $2 million that's going to get split among 12 teams at the time. Who cares? And you go 6-6. And again, you put an end to a season that everyone wanted to forget anyway. And let's say the NCAA still would have, imposed those sanctions the next year. That's the very worst that would have happened.
Right, for sure. And
maybe felt some kind of obligation to the senior class that they would play in a bowl game. That's the only thing I can think of that makes any sense.
Perhaps. And, I look back at that entire situation, because even now too, you look at, I don't know how similar you see the Jim Harbaugh situation with right now, with him lying to the NCAA and being suspended, 3 or 4 games. And then Jim Tressel, he lied to the NCAA and, basically lost his job for it. Just the whole thing, even the more we go on and the more we look back on it, it's just, it was mishandled by Ohio State and everything else. But then again, I look at it and I say, who's the other largest athletic department? You talked about it earlier, Texas. It's not an easy job to run all that stuff. And, you can be really, really big, but that doesn't always equal success. And I know a lot of Ohio State fans like the rumor that, the reason that UCLA and USC are coming to the Big Ten are because of Gene Smith. And so, he's going to be leaving Ohio State with quite the reputation of the Gator Bowl and conference realignment, expansion, everything else going on. Just crazy to think about it all and to think of who the next person stepping in will even be.
Yeah, the great majority of those moves and decisions and the growth of the program and the success of all the athletic programs and especially football are a great positive on his resume. Just an issue with that. And I don't recall exactly what came out of his mouth that caused all the controversy concerning whether in a first round playoff game and wanting to move those games to Indianapolis to play under a dome, but it may not have, his intent may not have been as drastic as what people took from that, but obviously got a lot of criticism for not, basically stating that we want to play home playoff games in the cold. And, he knows that his words carry a lot of weight and they're going to get misconstrued. And maybe they weren't misconstrued. I know that I watched them at the time.
I think they were just elevated because they had just lost to Michigan in the snow, months before that. So, and that in combination with CJ Stroud saying that they were, they had the flu or they were sick or something like that. It was just statements that were said that, fans and media, and not saying that media do a bad job. It's mostly the fans who take it, but some media sources do like to get one quote and just write it out from there. And and that coupled with his comments about Michigan kind of just being another game and not focusing too much on that because, he's trying to protect Ryan Day. I think it's obvious he really likes the coaches he has there now between Ryan Day, Chris Holtman, all the other ones. I know those aren't football, but, tough situation. But I agree. I think he's done a good job. Some things I'd like to see different, but, who doesn't have things they could have done different in life?
Absolutely. And when it comes to the Michigan game, the game is everything to Ohio State. The game is everything to Ohio State and anybody connected with Ohio State. But considering the outcome of the last 2 years, it's in his best interest and Ryan Day and the university to somewhat downplay it, to say, yes, it's massive, but it's not everything. And that doesn't sit well with Ohio State fans when they've lost 2 years in a row.
Right. Especially the heat that Ryan Day has been taking away from it. And I'm sure he's annoyed too, because, Michigan canceled the game last time. And I know that's for various different reasons with COVID, and we can go into all the rumors with that if we want to. But, essentially, the game that was played for, I think, over 100 years straight was canceled. And then the backlash from that didn't seem to be nearly as great as what Ryan Day is getting now. And the elevation that Jim Harbaugh gets in certain people's eyes, even though the guy is 2-5, not trying to take away from his 2 wins. They were 2 great wins for him. But,
Yeah, I in no way want to feel sorry for Ryan Day. He shouldn't, there's no reason to feel sorry for him. He's well paid. He's got a prominent position. He's risen to the top of his sport, all those sorts of things. But, there is a kind of a unfair quality to, we could be sitting here having this discussion in whatever the number of months, 3 months, and they could be 11-0, and it could be 3 days before the Michigan game. And in the eyes of most people, he hadn't accomplished anything yet. So he would have 3 tremendous wins under his belt, but the outcome of the Michigan game would still dictate how most people would view him.
Right. And, I think he doesn't get enough credit for what he did in 2020. The Big Ten going through all that it went through, and for him to formulate that team together. Obviously, I know they're one of the most talented teams in the country, so it's not like he's working from, anything bad. But for him to get that team together and in 6 games, make it to the playoffs and to beat some pretty good teams along the way, and also beat Clemson in order to get to the national championship, I think everybody just wants to kind of forget 2020, which I get that was hard for some teams and it wasn't exactly fair territory, but he should get more credit for that 2020 season. I personally think, but again, I'm an Ohio State fan, so I'm probably biased.
Well, JR, thank you so much for the call. Appreciate you being here.
Yep. Thank you, Mark.
All right. We'll keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Before I take the next call, let me address this statement. So Jim Harbaugh and his Michigan team have decimated Ohio State in the fourth quarter the last 2 years to win the game that counts in that conference. That is everything. So Michigan fans, in defending Harbaugh, I would love to be able to go back with all these Michigan fans and their statements and their mindset and their support of Harbaugh at this point 2 years ago. I was defending Jim Harbaugh ad nauseum 2 years ago to say, yeah, he's not getting it done against Ohio State. No, he's not winning a Big Ten championship. But look at 2016. Look at the measurement. Look at how good they were in 2018, and they just suddenly collapsed in Columbus. And look what he did at San Francisco. Look what he did at Stanford. 2 amazing turnarounds there, both on the college level and the NFL, and not given enough credit for that. I was defending Jim Harbaugh ad nauseum, and now he can do no wrong. Well, let's understand that his tenure against Ohio State is still maybe break even. If you go 2-5 against Ohio State, you're kind of break even. It should be a failure in a sense, but he has broken through, won 2 games, won 2 Big Ten championships. But against Ryan Day, who's had a better tenure? Who's had a better tenure at their school? Think of it this way. I know Jim Harbaugh's won 2 straight against Ryan Day, but let's understand Ryan Day won by 4 scores the year before. So let's not take that away from him. It's a win for Ryan Day against Jim Harbaugh. So it's 2-1. And let's size this up for a second here. The winning percentage isn't close. Ryan Day. But of course, Ryan Day took over a much better program from a much better coach, a legendary coach with the best winning percentage of all time, versus Jim Harbaugh taking over a 5-7 program. So I totally understand that. But if it's just wins and losses, Ryan Day has a much better record than Jim Harbaugh. Has a much better Big Ten record. He's won 2 Big Ten championships in 4 seasons. Jim Harbaugh has won 2 in 8 seasons. Ryan Day's won a college football playoff game, gone to a championship game, lost 2 excruciatingly close games to great opponents. Jim Harbaugh's not performed well in 2 playoff games and 1 in 6 straight postseason losses. So right now, Ryan Day's got a better tenure at Ohio State than Jim Harbaugh has at Michigan. That's just the way it is. All right. Sergeant Pickles is here to talk some college football with us here at the Voice of College Football.
How are we doing? Can everyone hear me?
We got you.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, just a couple of quick ones before I got to step back in from break at work. Sorry about the road noise going by.
No, you're good.
Yeah, so I just kind of had 2 quick ones I've been thinking about as there goes the truck. I've been kind of thinking about the idea. I know we get the SMU to the ACC. They're just looking for a home and a spot at the big table. I've kind of been thinking, why is SMU and Tulane not on the short list for a conference like the ACC, assuming they can add them without opening up Florida State to leave? They would be, even a Cal and Stanford, if you bring in 2 or even 4 more teams, you're almost bracing for impact. And in the thought that if you lose teams, you're not going to suffer the same fate as the Pac-12. You'll be a lesser ACC, but you will survive. Is there any validity, you think, to like an SMU and Tulane?
Absolutely. Absolutely there is. So I said this, I get our call-in shows all mixed up. At whatever point I said this in the last couple of days, I said pretty much the same thing, that the ACC going after whatever it is, some semblance of, I would have never thought Stanford and Cal, my thought would have been they're Mountain West bound, or they're Big Ten bound, or they're going to be independents. But here we are, ACC. And there was talk, obviously, as you well know, for months about the ACC and the Pac-12 partnering up, and maybe that should have been something that they looked at a long time ago.
Not a fan,
especially on the Pac-12 side. What'd you say? You're not a fan?
No, not for the ACC. If we want to talk about how travel to the Big Ten is crazy, that would be a whole another level worse with Pac-12 ACC.
There would have been a way to do it, though, to make it manageable. And that way would have been when there was still a Pac-12 to talk about that was fairly even in numbers. You could play in two different silos and play almost all your league games in those two silos, maybe have one crossover, and then play a championship game.
Yeah, I mean, it's glorified non-conference game, I guess, but I suppose it would work. I don't know how it would have prevented like an SC and UCLA leaving in the end, though.
No. So back to reality. And so the point that I made the other night seems to be similar to what you're saying, that the ACC is possibly, by making those moves, it's not a probability, but a possibility that they strengthen their position enough to keep their best schools, keep Florida State, keep Clemson, by fortifying the league. But at the very worst, they still scatter for the SEC and the Big Ten. You lose 3 schools, 4 schools, but you've backfilled with football commodities and markets that are comparable, if not better in some ways, than schools that you already have in your league. Right. The Memphis area, large geographic or population center, and obviously New Orleans, Tulane. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why years ago I said, go get Central Florida and South Florida, get into fortify Florida. You got 2 rising at that point. USF was doing the right things on the field. But they're getting into the game a little bit late, and now they just have to pick off the best commodities out there. But I agree with you that those 2, look at what the Big 12 did with the 3 best programs in the American at the time.
Right.
The ACC should be doing the same thing. And from a geographic standpoint, it actually makes a little more sense.
Yeah, I don't think there's much they can do, whether it's a year from now or near the end of the grant of rights for the ACC. I don't think there's much they can offer to keep those high-end teams in the conference. So I think being proactive and adding, maybe not the best value, but the best available teams like a USF or Tulane or even SMU, who seems to want to spend money like it's going out of style, add those proactively. You're not going to suffer the same fate as the Pac. Whether or not you remain a power conference, at least you still exist.
Yeah, if you're able to do that, let's say you lose 3 or 4, you're in the 10 range, you add the same number. Let's say you maintain your 14 number. Maybe you're not quite as good as the Big 12, but on the top end, your best schools are maybe your best football playing schools are Pitt, NC State, Louisville, Tulane, depending on what they could do with recruiting in an ACC versus what they do now. Syracuse, Boston College, we've
respectable at least.
Yeah, they've been at times, not recently, but at times that I guess they're a little bit lesser than. They're probably on par with what the Big 12 is right this second, minus the additions of Utah, Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado.
Yeah, my other one, moving off that before I go, I may have missed this on some of your earlier shows this week, been a little busy, but how do you think the Washington-Oregon kind of impacts the recruiting train? And this comes personal to me as a Husky fan, because JT Tuimoloau and Emeka Egbuka are both literally from 10 miles from where I'm sitting. And I think there is a real possibility that in a world where Washington's in the Big Ten, they both stay home, because, Ohio State's a fantastic brand. They'd put in a good pitch to still grab them over Washington, but you have a way better position saying you're still going to play at the top end conference level and play home games in front of your family. So I think I think it actually makes a big difference. The opposite to that I've been talking with other Big Ten fans is their argument is that it actually might benefit the existing Big Ten members more because all those skill players on the West Coast are now more available to them. Ohio State can get anyone anywhere, but an Iowa, a Wisconsin, a Nebraska, even like a Minnesota can now make a pitch to West Coast recruits and specifically California.
Well, if we're going to go with the stereotype, and the reason it's a stereotype, it is generally true, but it's not, of course, 100% absolute, that we're going to stereotype that the West Coast is going to be producing quarterbacks and wide receivers and skill position players in the Midwest, offensive linemen, linebackers, etc. That, okay, yes, who benefits from this more? Grabbing from the other's footprint. I tend to agree with your first statement because we could argue all day as to what the recruiting pitch is for an Iowa going to a California. And we know Iowa and the level of players that they recruit and develop. They're probably not going head to head against USC for these players we're talking about. They're going to Southern California and they're going to out recruit. Who knows where Oregon State and Washington State are going to be, but they're going to out recruit, the better teams in the Mountain West, San Diego State, maybe for players, and say, you can come to Iowa. And now you're not playing just a million miles away in some other conference that's big time, but we've got ties to the West Coast and we're going to be playing these West Coast teams and we're going to be here. And then, but your first point for the truly elite athletes, I think they were starting to shun. I think it was pretty obvious. A lot of them, the Pac-12, because most of the games are played in relative obscurity compared to playing in the Big Ten and playing against, the sales pitch of you want to play against the best, or what could be argued to be the best, the SEC or the Big Ten, to develop yourself for the NFL. And you want to play in games that people paying attention to. But now you can stay home and do that and still play in the Big Ten.
Yeah. If anyone kind of has this perception, I mean, USC is enough of a blue blood. They still competed for those high-end 5-star type guys. And there's quite a few that come out of California. Oregon will run on and on about our recruiting class. And then you go look at the transfer portal, how many of those top-end guys leave Oregon and look at where they're going to. They're going to the Big Ten. They're going to the SEC. And that's been the trend recently. I'm curious if that reverses kind of along with what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm going to make a large leap here, and it's truly pure speculation that Dakota Fields, the cornerback out of Gardena, California, top 10 cornerback, who you're happy. You're a Washington fan, correct?
Yep.
So you're not happy, but anyway, he flipped. Yeah, it's 6'1", half a dozen the other. He flipped from USC to Oregon. So the immediate thought is that, did he favor Oregon the whole time, but weigh the Big Ten versus Pac-12 disparity in prominence, exposure, all that, NFL development, and then say, hey, now Oregon's in the Big Ten, I'd rather go there. We don't know that, but if that
has to be a guess because the Oregon has more NIL money than they know what to do with. So that couldn't have been, I don't imagine that would have been a high factor even compared to a USC. And as far as Oregon and Washington recruiting, we flipped Caleb Presley, who was committed to Oregon, 4-star, from Seattle area. And then after the Oregon UW game, we beat them and he flipped back to UW. So I think more people I think the players actually look at the results on the field more than some of us would imagine even. They want to go to a competitive team, and now especially you're a competitive team in a top-end conference in Oregon and Washington, all those things are available to you. NFL, if that's your dream, big-time stage, big noon kickoff, which I got to say I'm looking forward to a big noon kickoff for Washington at 9 a.m. local time. That'll be great.
Yeah, we look at the landscape of college football. We look at it making decisions for 17-year-olds based on how we see it. We still have to
Right.
consider that even though there shouldn't be much emotion in the decision, they're human beings and they're at an age where there is emotion. And that's why they take them to packed out stadiums to witness the game on the field, the fervor, the excitement, the adulation for the players, all of that to sway them.
Right. Yeah, yeah, someone else made a good point that especially with NIL these days, there's definitely been rumblings behind the curtain that families and other people are getting far more involved than they used to because the legal perils of doing so aren't there. And they're kind of curious that that's why you'll see a lot of these guys go to the high-end school, take the big money NIL to an A&M, and then transfer after a year because it might not have been where they wanted to go all along. They're kind of coerced into it by their family or others.
Yeah, the recruiting game has become even more complicated with all this NIL, and anytime a player commits, that has to be the first thing in mind was it simply a dollar valuation of 2 NIL deals, which technically they're not even supposed to know of if everything was above board and being played according to the guidelines. But
right. Well, I got to hop off real quick, but it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for having me on, and go Dogs.
Appreciate you being here, man. All right, we'll keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We had Michelle Gardner stop by from the Arizona Republic to talk Arizona State's move to the Big 12. We had Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football to talk ACC, discussing athletic directors and presidents over the last few days, discussing Stanford and Cal. The next discussion is going to center around SMU, the ACC. Some of us thought it was crazy 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, bringing in the likes of Louisville and others that were nowhere close to the Atlantic coast, and now SMU to the ACC. Check out the videos we posted. Have a whole lot of fun, and I hope they're insightful in regards to matching up these various schools and their football programs against their new conferences. So we've matched up Utah against the Big 12. Probably need to re-release. No, we did that. We did repost that. We did. We've got to update that because we posted those videos months ago, looking at all these moves to say, well, what would Oregon do against the Big Ten? What would Washington do against the Big Ten? And here we are 4 months later, and it's happened. And so we have updated those videos, added more information, and we've lined up Washington against the Big Ten. I got to release that video. That one has yet to be released, but Oregon versus the Big Ten, and then the 4 schools coming from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, how they have fared in recent years. We've looked at the last 10 or 12 years, even going back, depending on the number of games, 20 years. We've looked at how good those programs have been on their own. So not just how they've competed against, let's say, Arizona against the Big 12, but what is the comparison of Arizona in the last 10 or 20 years versus Utah versus Arizona State versus Colorado against each other, and then also straight line. What is their record, their winning percentage, conference championships, top 10, top 25 finishes, all of that, bowl records, etc. So please check out the videos that we've done, and we will continue to do that. The way things are moving so quickly, Stanford and Cal may beat us to the punch, but we will line up what it would be a sparse history of Stanford against the ACC and Cal against the ACC. Again, I remember a Cal series against North Carolina about 5 or so years ago. And again, Stanford against the ACC, I'm coming up with the Sun Bowl against Pitt, 14-13 in 2018 against that Kenny Pickett Pitt team. And then the year before, stopping Mitch Trubisky at the goal line on a 2-point conversion by Solomon Thomas. Stanford defeated UNC. So 2-0 against the ACC about 5 years ago in bowl games. But other than that, they've not scheduled games. And the times that Stanford has come east for, and when I say east, I don't mean all the way to the ACC country, to the Atlantic coast, but has come somewhat east, has been, well, we've got Of course, they play Notre Dame every other year in South Bend. They went to Northwestern about 10 years ago and were upset on the first day of the season. Christian McCaffrey and company, and they played at UCF about 5 years ago. All right, we got Talk is Pitt on the line to talk some college
Hello,
football.
Mark Rogers.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you being here. You've got a school there in Pitt that certainly has had a nice run under Pat Narduzzi and seems to be caught in the middle of this in regards to the haves and the have-nots. I would not consider Pitt to either be a have or a have-not. What are your thoughts about Pitt's prospects?
If you go by the history that we had early on, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s,
Oh,
and even
absolutely. Yes.
into the 80s, then absolutely yes.
Sure.
But if you were to ask me, Pitt is one of those blue bloods that hasn't lived up to the hype of being a blue blood, because Pitt has done a lot for college football in years prior, but for whatever reason, I think ever since we moved from independent to a conference, that's when I started realizing we're probably not as good or talented or competitive as we thought. And to be honest, Pitt's, like you said, is in the middle. They're stuck in the middle. They're not going to get 5-star recruits to commit. Now, luckily, in the past year, we've had multiple 5-star visit the campus. None of them have committed. But as far as being what they are now, they're a has-been.
Oh, you're being quite harsh on your team there. I haven't heard that out of you in the past, but let me say this: Talk is Pitt. As soon as you called your team there a blue blood, you can imagine you're getting pounded in the chat. And I was going to raise a bit of an eyebrow to that as well. So I get your point about being a blue blood. People would be surprised to know how many national championships Pitt has going back to the 20s and 30s and so forth. And of course, fielded the great Tony Dorsett team in 1976 and a national championship that season. And we're a national, and I mean top of the line elite power into the early 80s. Jackie Sherrill, Dan Marino, and all those great defensive players, Hugh Green and so forth. We could go on and on. Bill Fralick, just great players. And then you kind of hit the Foge Fazio era, and just 7 and 8 win teams were pretty much the standard at Pitt. And then, of course, the breakthrough to an ACC championship 2 years ago.
Yeah. See, the level of competition within the ACC, it's not like it is in the Big Ten or the SEC. And some people will even say it's not to the level of competition in the Big 12. Well, the thing is, Pitt has a winning record against most of the past and current Big 12 teams. I think there is only one that we don't have a winning record against, and that's Texas. We haven't played Texas since 1995. And to address Tim Prangley's comment about Pitt not being a blue blood, that's literally what I just said. They're a blue blood that doesn't live up to the hype of being a blue blood. So no, right now they're not a blue blood.
If you mind me interrupting here for a quick second, we can all have an argument over actually what a blue blood is. So for me, and I'm not saying my definition is the definition, it's only my definition. You know, if you went back to the very, blue blood is a royal term about being that regardless of what you do, what you accomplish, you're always going to have a royal bloodline. Mm-hmm. It's running in your veins from the origin, from the beginning. Well, the origin of college football, we can't go all the way back to 1870, whatever, 69, I believe is the first year, because no blue bloods would even exist, from that time all the way through. So you kind of go back to the 20s, the 30s, in that range, and you pick off the Notre Dames and Michigans and those, and then the Ohio States and USC's joined them, and Alabama was winning national championships in the 20s and 30s, but so was Pitt. So in my estimation, again, getting back to the definition, take Clemson, for example. Clemson could win 50 national championships in a row, and I'm taking the term, they're definitely elite, and they've been elite for the last 10 or 12 years, but they're not a blue blood because they weren't successful and a superpower at the origin of when college football took off.
Yeah, and Pitt was.
And Pitt was, yes.
So what I said earlier about them being a blue blood but not living up to the hype currently, it's true.
So is Army a blue blood?
Army, to be honest, Mark, I don't think I've ever watched one Army or even Navy game in my life.
Well, really? You've never watched an
I
Army or
don't
Navy
think I've
game?
ever. I've seen an Air Force game, and that's only because my current cousin Brittany, she is in the Air Force, and she took me to one of their games. But I've never seen an Army or a Navy game.
Okay. Well, regardless, the only reason I bring up Army is that they were winning national championships up into the 40s and were one of the great powers in college football. So by certain definitions, they could be considered a blue blood, even though they've been completely, I don't want to say completely insignificant, but on a national scale in terms of winning big games.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing about college football is the fan base is so diverse as far as age and who was around for what, that a lot of people consider this team a blue blood. A lot of people don't consider this team a blue blood. And a lot of people, even in our instances, don't recognize the national championships before they were born. I get into a lot of arguments with people who, well, I wasn't born, so it doesn't count. And I'm like, okay, well, then half your wins before you were born don't count either.
So let's get to the here and now, because we could argue this all day. I don't think of Pitt being a blue blood, but you make a very persuasive claim because truly, if you go back to when college football kind of started to become somewhat standardized, the AP poll started in 1936. The 20s and 30s is when college football really started to become somewhat organized, and the conferences were somewhat close to what they've been for the ensuing decades, and Pitt was winning national championships. So anyway, getting back to the here and now and all this realignment business, what is the best possible case scenario for Pitt? Is it that the ACC somehow stabilizes and they just stay put?
No. If what I'm seeing online and from the SMU, the Cal, and the Stanford fans that I just talked to on Twitter before I got here, I do not think Pitt, and this was before I found this out, I do not think Pitt would benefit if other teams come into the conference. And I personally, if I was the athletic director for Pitt, I would jump ship to the Big 12 for obvious reasons, financial reasons. Half our old rivals are in the Big 12, UCF, Cincinnati, West Virginia. So to me, that would make more sense than to Pitt sitting on their hands and waiting for it to either go good or go bad. I honestly, I'm not exactly sure a lot of other people are on board with SMU, Cal, and Stanford going into the ACC. Now, SMU, what my notes say right here, SMU has offered to actually play for free and forego their conference share for a couple of years until things and all the finances work out. Now, if it's just SMU coming in, I'd be okay with that. I think Pitt would stay put. But Cal and Stanford and a very probably unequal revenue share, I don't see Pitt taking that. I think they're going to leave.
All right, talk is Pitt. On to the Big 12 for Pitt. Yeah, well, it's security. It's roughly the same amount of money. Some people don't know that while the Big 12 contract is roughly the same as the ACC has its lower years of revenue behind it, so it is escalating, just not anywhere close to what it needs to escalate over the remainder of the contract. So the grant of rights puts the ACC in this strange position where if the grant of rights is as binding as a lot of people report it to be, then the ACC is locked in for 13 years, but they are also locked into pretty much the 99% chance that they will have no league in 13 years because everyone's going to scatter for a better deal.
Yeah. And that's what I've tried to explain to Florida State fans. If Florida State was truly serious about leaving, first of all, they would have never said anything in the first place. They would have pulled what everybody else has done and kept their mouth shut until the deal was actually inked into paper. Now, with your point going towards everybody might be stuck here for the next 13 years, I honestly think that's more of a possibility than a lot of teams even jumping ship, because you have to realize the payout is very, very high. And a lot of these ACC teams, they may be able to afford it, but do they want to afford it? Do they want to continue paying off their buyout from the grant of rights to the ACC? And also, what a lot of people don't understand is even if they leave, they still have no media rights to their home games.
Yes. But let's also understand that how many times do two partners in an agreement, whether that's be personal or in a business sense, that have this much contention going on? You know, we're talking about public ridicule of the conference saying they're not, they need to do X, Y, and Z for us, regardless of whether they do X, Y, and Z. And I mean, unequal distribution of revenue in our direction. That's still not going to be enough for a contentious relationship to continue for 13 years. I think seems unlikely.
Yeah, I agree with you, to be honest. I don't see any team really sticking it out for 13 years. When I mean sticking it out, I mean for like the next couple of years until they can find a loophole. Because to be honest, Law 101 states there's a loophole in every contract. You just got to look for it. You got to know the right terminology to say, to be like, hey, this isn't fair to any of us. Because to be honest, the ACC and the current schools and the schools that joined back in 2014, I don't think they really realized what they were walking into. I don't think Pitt, Louisville, and I'm trying to think who else might have joined the conference back then. I'm drawing in a blank.
Syracuse.
Yeah, that's who it was. I don't think they really thought moving to the ACC through. Now, Pitt, on the other hand, the ACC wasn't their first option. The Big Ten was, but Penn State blocked that.
And again, also Boston College.
Boston College.
The ACC locked in security without giving thought to being surpassed in the meantime by all these other conferences from the monetary standpoint.
And that's the one of the biggest problems is the powers that be back then, which I think most of them are gone now. The powers that be back then really only saw it as a money liner in their pockets and not what it could do eventually to the university. I'm not saying right then and there it would have caused problems, but look what's happening now. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, they all want to leave. And if they add SMU, Cal, and Stanford, in my opinion, that's a reason for them to leave.
All right, Talk is Pitt. Appreciate you stopping by.
No problem. I'll be on Wolfman's show later on in about an hour.
Oh, very nice. So, folks, on the West Virginia channel, 4 p.m. Eastern time, you got Talk is Pitt joining the Wolfman. That's right here at the Voice of College Football over on the West Virginia channel. I understand that Pitt and West Virginia kind of have a rivalry that you may want to talk about.
It's not kind of a rivalry. It is a rivalry. Thanks for having me on, Mark. I know. Thanks for having me on, and I'll catch you later.
We appreciate it. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got our guy Nathan stopping by from Big 12 Mafia.
How we doing, Mark?
Nathan, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm going to move my window over here so I can look you straight in the face. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
You bet.
How do you like your new conference?
I love it. I mean, as we talked about, what was that just 2 minutes ago, about how cool it would be to have everybody in the same group. I am so excited. I think the Big 12 got stronger. You know, there's going to be a fight over this, who's number 3. The top 2 are obvious, but the Big 12 is, I think, the most united, least polarized conference right today, and prepared for big things. I can't wait for this year, but obviously 24 is going to be big.
Yeah, we eventually need to talk some football. My goodness.
Right, I know.
About the future. Everybody's talking about 2036 and
right.
2024. Those are the 2 big years that come up. And at whatever point the college football playoff contract runs out, I think that's 2026.
Right.
But yeah, why don't we talk some ball?
Absolutely. What do you want to know?
Well, I want to know how good BYU is going to be this year. Let's start there before I grill you on any specific questions.
So last year, in the last few years, BYU has been in the top 20 in offense consistently. So the problem hasn't been skill positions. We beat every team in the Pac-12 South 2 years ago. But the real problem was the defense. And if anybody knows BYU, they score a lot of points, but it's how much the defense can hold the opponent to is really what your record's going to be. So I think the over-under for BYU is 6.5, I believe, 6 or 6.5. I'm telling everybody to take the over on that. If we get 7 wins, I think people will be excited. I actually think there's a couple we can steal. I think we could possibly steal Oklahoma, second to last game in November. I know most people probably, especially on your show, because it's more Eastern focused, would guffaw at that. But BYU's 2-0 against Oklahoma all time, 4-1 against Texas all time, and they play well in November. It depends what time of day that game is. If it's a day game, there's good possibility that you're going to have some clear skies with some snow on the ground, and the elevation is a big help. So I personally am picking them to go 8-4, 9-4 with a bowl win. But I think that could go either way, either a game up or a game down. So the defense is what needs to change, to answer your question directly. We got a new defensive coordinator, the old coach at Weber State, and he's a defensive whiz. He's actually out of the Kyle Whittingham tree of coaches. He was at Utah for several years when Kyle first took over the job, and then went to do some other jobs, and now BYU stole him back. He's the highest paid assistant they've ever brought in. He's a ex head coach, so he's a big leader. And there's a bit of a Marshall style right now at BYU fall camp on defense. They're taking some pride and making some good stops. So if BYU plays well on offense like we expect, then I think they could do well this year.
You can join Nathan on Twitter at Big 12 Mafia, and the YouTube channel here is The Holy Rivals, correct?
It's Big 12 Mafia and The Holy Rivals. We're actually splitting those two away to focus on different things. The Holy Rivals show is going to be about the Holy War, BYU, Utah. Big 12 Mafia, or at B12 Mafia, is that's my core site, and that's BYU, Realignment, big picture college, and then also the Big 12.
All right.
And they're both on YouTube, by the way. They're both on YouTube.
So that's Big 12 Mafia on YouTube, folks. And it's
Yes.
also the Holy Rivals on YouTube as well. Good stuff. Well, Nathan, one of the marks of BYU has, of course, been keeping coaches. So that's kind of a vicious cycle, that if you're able to keep stability, then the stability precedes the winning, but the winning obviously hold the stability. You're going to keep a coach that's winning, and then you're more likely to win if the coach has been in play and able to establish his system. So starting with Lavelle Edwards, more recently Bronco Mendenhall, and now Kalani Sitake, the stability of the head coaching position has been remarkable at the school going back to the 70s. So your thoughts about the job that Kalani Sitake is doing?
I love Kalani Sitake. Like, look, let's compare the two last coaches. Bronco Mendenhall, very ordered. He's a good organizer. He definitely can whip people into shape, turn around programs if they're struggling. But let's be honest, not the most emotional guy. Kind of hard to get insight into what he's thinking. There were passionate moments, of course, but Kalani Sitake is the absolute opposite, and in the best way, because Kalani is actually a Lavelle Edwards clone. He does everything the way Lavelle did. Lavelle, if you don't know, besides being a legend, 268, I think, all-time wins, which was 4th or 5th at the time. Anyway, he was more of a manager, right? He did not do the day-to-day coaching. He had assistant coaches that were really, really good. Norm Chow and Coach French was for offense, and they were defense. They were amazing, and he could just rely on all those coaches so that he could lead from passion, from faith, from energy, and they won. You and I both know they won a lot of games, and that's what Kalani Sitake's brought in. He's brought the passion back. He's more of a manager. He's not doing the day-to-day technical stuff, but he is definitely the spiritual leader of this team. And boy, they love him. And BYU, every BYU Cougar loves him.
Nathan, while I'm intrigued to see which of the 4 new additions are the most successful, because I certainly sized it up at the time because I thought it was an interesting argument. There wasn't an obvious choice that so-and-so is going to be the most successful. I think they all have various paths to success and being a contender in the conference. What would be your pitch on BYU possibly long-term being the most successful of the 4 new additions?
So there's 2 things, and these are universal for BYU. Anything BYU includes basketball. The longevity of the program, the legacy that we've built up over 50 years actually carries forward to today, in that everybody knows where they're going. If you don't know about BYU, it's a faith-based university. The athletics program does not get any money from the church. It's all either booster or tickets or media money. So it's not subsidized from the church, but it's definitely a faith-based organization. And the longevity piece of it is we have roughly 6 million LDS people in the United States, and a lot of them play football. A lot of them play football all over the country. We're very frequently, the LDS players in a lot of these states are actually in the top 10s in some cases, and some cases even been number 1 in the past. Ben Olsen was an example. But the problem has been they haven't been in a big league, right? You get a guy, you got a chance to either go to Stanford, which BYU loses a ton of their players to Stanford. I think that's going away if Stanford goes independent. I think that possibly could go away, even if they drop to a Mountain West type conference. So a lot of those feelers where they were going to Utah, Stanford, USC, pretty much everybody in the Pac-12, and then some Texas, a little bit in Florida. Obviously, those are big states for football players. Now BYU can say, hey, we're here. We arrived. We're now playing the same teams that everybody else is playing. We get the same recognition, and it's really turned around recruiting. Just in this last week, we picked up, which is uncommon for us, picked up, I believe, 2 or 3 DBs, or 2 DBs and a safety that are rated 3 stars or higher. And that's unheard of for BYU, especially on defense. One of them was even from Florida. Another one was from Georgia. So those are huge recruiting wins for BYU. No, they're not 4 stars, but they are better than we've had. And if you compare with how we've competed in the past, I would point to 2021 as the best example, where we beat pretty much everybody you put in front of us, except for Coastal, which was kind of a overnight game. We didn't get really much to do on that one. And then there was one other game they've sort of threw away, but beat up and down the Pac-12. And now those are teams that right now, 2 years later, you're saying, hey, now they're in the Big Ten, right? Or they're Oregon and Washington and Cal, and Stanford, and I mean all of them. So that's one of them. That's the first thing, is that if we can keep those LDS people going to BYU now instead of going to these other schools, and it might take a few years, BYU has the potential to be back the way we were in the 80s and 90s, which is a perennial 9-win, 10-win team. Every year is in the top 25 and is getting recruits that other people don't understand how they win. The second key that they're really good at, and I think this is Kalani, is bringing in transfers, either grad transfers, the new transfer portal. BYU, I think, is in the top 15 in everybody transferring into the school. That's huge, because it brings in people that, like, a great example, Keaton Slovis. I know we have some Pitt people in here. I just listened to your Pitt resource, and Keaton Slovis was there last year. He played well. I mean, they won, was it 8 or 9 games? But he lost, like Jordan Addison went to USC. His number 1 receiver, he went there to throw to him. The guy leaves, and they still win 9 games. So he comes to BYU. Now he's experienced. He played at USC. He's got over 11,000 yards in his career, and he knows how to win.
And his first game was against you, right?
I'm sorry?
And his first game was against you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We beat him in Provo. Yeah. I'm glad you remember that. Yeah. And anyways, and that was actually a thing for him. He said, they were awesome. The crowd was amazing. Yeah, we lost the game, but it's kind of hard not to fall in love with the BYU fans. And if you're from out of state, you come to BYU and you're in the special section for visitors, you're going to get ice cream. That's how we treat people that come to the stadium. But it's 65,000, and it's one of the loudest stadiums you'll ever play in, including in pros. And they're pretty much down on top of you. Not Oklahoma State on top, but they're pretty close to the field.
I got to say, Nathan, that what this move is robbing me of, meaning BYU to the Big 12, is one of my favorite exercises in the off season. Is when I go through all the schedules, and I didn't do this off season. Was I rank all the schedules in the Power 5, and I would group BYU in the Power 5. And I always was the most intrigued by BYU's schedule, because you never knew what you were going to get. You'd get a collection of the Pac-12 and some Mountain West, but it was always what I consider to be the oddest, strangest schedule, because it always seemed as though the September schedule was a gauntlet. Because
it was a front-loaded schedule every year.
Front-loaded schedule, because that's obviously before the teams in conferences would go into their silos and play in their conferences. And then it looked to be this potpourri of just smorgasbord of just trying to piece together. 1 week you'd be playing a top 10 team. You could be playing a Michigan State or a Wisconsin. And then the next week you're playing Wagner. And it was just all over the place. Utah Tech. And just an interesting schedule. I always thought it was just the most intriguing schedule.
It has obviously. I don't just want to even use the independence era as those schedules. Lavelle used to travel the United States to go play games. He would play anywhere, anytime. He wasn't afraid of anybody. And I think that was amazing, because you're a WAC school at the time, or even the Mountain West, not getting a lot of respect, but you're willing to travel to Alabama and actually try to compete. You go to LSU and you get beat down, but you went to LSU. So they were trying to do everything they could to get out in front of people and say, this is who we are. The part of the athletic mission at BYU is to project a good appearance of the LDS Church. And so without sports, or without those two programs, I'm not sure BYU does that, because that's the only reason that they do it. It's just like, we want to represent that we're good examples of people that believe in what we believe, and we hope that, you know, on the way we can shake hands after we fight a little bit, and it'll all be fun.
Well, Nathan, before we let you go, shoot, I'm losing my topic. I wanted to hit you on one other thing involving BYU in this landscape, and it's escaped me now, unfortunately. Well, tell us what you got going there at Big 12 Mafia, and it'll come back to me.
You bet, no problem. And thanks for the time. I appreciate being here. I'll show up whenever you want me. I really enjoy your show, always have. And yeah, anyways, to get off of that. So we got two shows. The Holy Rivals is basically built for BYU, Utah, and the Holy War. That game is top 5 nationally. I don't care what your list is. It's in the top 5 nationally of all rivalry games. It is bloodthirsty. These are teams that absolutely hate each other, but the games are always fantastic. So that rivalry has an entire channel on YouTube, and we're building that up. That's what me and the Wild Ute are doing. The Big 12 Mafia, which I hate to do this, but I got to correct you a little bit. It's not the full big, it's B12 Mafia. You don't have to change it. I was just letting you know, Mark. But Big 12 Mafia is going to be, and going forward is going to be more
Nathan,
of a.
What did I mess up there on your?
It's just the Big 12 Mafia, the @ symbol, right? The Twitter handle.
Yes.
It's just B12, like
That's
B12 vitamin. There. It says BIG. This is stupid. I shouldn't even have said anything.
No. We need to get this correct. I'm looking at your Twitter handle, and that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing big BIG 12 Mafia.
On the Twitter, no, it isn't. It's B12.
Oh, but the actual name is. I got you.
Yes, it is. The actual name is Big 12 Mafia.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that was kind of silly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said
anything. No, it's not silly. We need to get that right.
That's going to be more commentary. It's going to be analyzing. I made a decision late last night that I'm not going to be doing the play-by-play for the BYU games, anything like that. Even the previews I've sort of thrown out the window. We're going to do commentary, interviews, and insightful conversation. For instance, and this is pretty cool, I appreciate the timing of this. Tomorrow I have Bob Thompson on my show. Bob Thompson, the Fox retired, I should say, Fox Sports president, is going to be on my show tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, and it's Big 12 Mafia on YouTube, and that is going to be my dream interview. And I've got Jim Williams that has come on there. There's been several other either influencers or other journalists that have been on my show, and Brett McMurphy has told me he would come. John Arand has told me he would come. Oh, no, sorry. Andrew Marchand is who it was. But these are important people out in college sports. And I want to get them on my show and ask them questions that I'm not hearing anybody else do. So I would challenge anybody to come and just give us a chance. Tomorrow's a big one. It'll be my biggest show ever with Bob Thompson. I'd really encourage you to come. And I saw your comment, or one of your people's viewers' comments that says, no religion talk. I don't do religion talk. That's not going to come from us. I just wanted to mention what BYU was in case people didn't know. But we don't talk religion or politics or any of that nonsense on my show.
Well, absolutely. There's no way to get around. It comes with the territory in regards to just making a reference to that being a component of the university. You in no way went off on that. I don't know what you do on your channel, but absolutely. So I appreciate that. All right, Nathan, we appreciate you stopping by, sir.
Hey, it's no problem. So I'm going to, in front of all these people, I'm going to invite you on my show. Would you come on my show?
Absolutely, I will.
Excellent. All right. That's how I get interviews, by the way, is I put people on the spot. I appreciate that. Oh, and I want to call out two other, I already said Jim Williams. Greg Pflugar has been one of my biggest proponents, allies. He's been a mentor, and I really want everybody to know that. He is a great guy, and I don't know how people on your show care about him, but for me, He's got my loyalty forever for the stuff he's done for me. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
The only thing I can say about Greg, we connected on Twitter, at whatever point, probably here in the last year. And he's been very complimentary and encouraging of what we do here at the Voice of College Football. So he's been very kind to compliment our work. And
Excellent.
so I can't say that I apologize at times because I'm not out there watching everyone's content
Sure.
to really give a validation but he seems to be extremely knowledgeable and so forth. So yeah, Greg seems to be a great guy.
Hey, good luck on your show. I hope to be back soon. If you ever need me for anything, just holler. I'm going to send you my cell phone number. You can text me and I can jump on in a moment's notice if I have the time.
Awesome, Nathan. Well, thanks so much for giving your perspective
you bet.
On realignment, as always, sir.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon. I'll hold you to that show invite, right?
Hold me to
I'm
it.
not going to forget about that. Okay.
I'll be there.
Thank you to all your fans. Appreciate it. And any of my followers that came over, stick around and watch Mark's show if you're don't know about it. It's awesome. Anyway, everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Good to see you. Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
All right. Nathan, Big 12 Mafia. And again, let's get that straight. That's B12 Mafia on Twitter. We ran into Nathan a few weeks ago, and he's been a good resource through this entire realignment deal. For those of you that watch me on a regular basis, you know that I am no linchpin in the whole realignment game. I've tried to keep a balance of not going crazy on realignment. And let's get this straight. When Oklahoma and Texas left for the SEC, and when USC and UCLA left for the Big Ten, and I reported on that, shouldn't even say report. It's more accurate to say I responded to the reports, responded to the news. That's what we do here at the Voice of College Football. We have discussions with you, we have debates with you, and we analyze the moves that are made in college football and the ramifications. And of course, we focus on the field first and foremost, but we deal with the other aspects of it. If you looked at the amount of views, subscribers, all those metrics at the Voice of College Football, they just spike out of sight, off the screen. Oklahoma, Texas to the SEC, spiked off the screen. Had like one of the largest days, maybe the largest day, USC, UCLA, we had over 100,000 views in a day. So I could have beat that into the ground every day since. That's what I could have done. If all I was consumed with would be clicks and numbers. But I try to present legitimate talk here. So I'm not going to just speculate all over the place, make things up, throw things at the wall, throw things at the fan. That's not what we do here at the Voice of College Football. So my approach to realignment has been, when there is certainly breaking news, we are here immediately. Check out all the coaching changes across college football over the last 4 or 5 years. We have rarely missed being, boom, live. Paul Chryst fired at Wisconsin. Willie Taggart at Florida State. Mark D'Antonio leaves Michigan State. Mark Richt at Miami. On and on and on. The Lincoln Riley, of course, move. Brian Kelly. All those move. Brent Bennett. Boom, we're live. When there is a shakeup in realignment, like there's been constantly over the last 10 days, we're here live. I made a count over the span of 4 days, and we had 33 hours of live streaming in 4 days. That's 9 hours a day. And I was on basically all of it, almost all of it. So we will deliver when it's relevant, when it's meaningful, when it's valid and accurate. And then the other times that I've taken off on realignment is when there will be statements made by, and get this, Arizona and Arizona State's presidents made comments. I came across these videos from about 4 months ago. They made statements that I thought were very telling at the time, even though they were claiming solidarity and sticking through this to the end. And again, Pac-12 solidarity was the overriding statement by the ASU and Arizona presidents. I picked apart their statements, produced a video, and this was like 4 months ago, to say, are these statements telling? And so when I believe that there are statements made or rumors out there that have some substance, then we will discuss that. Aside from that, I'm not here to speculate every day, all day. And, we could make a living out of that. Others have. I won't. I want to focus on football. But again, realignment affects the football more than anything, impacts the football more than anything. So we're not going to ignore it. Certainly, we've attacked it. And also, then what I find a lot of contentment, enjoyment in, and you guys obviously do as well, is then when those moves are made, or when there is a likelihood or a possibility, a strong possibility, a reasonable possibility, like this Stanford deal to the ACC, then we will attack the proposal of the schedule. What should the schedule look like? What would Stanford look like in the ACC? How have they performed against ACC schools in the past? How will they perform against ACC schools in the future? So we attack it from those angles as well. And so we take on legitimate topics here, is the way we run the channels. Speaking of which, there's a bit of a change in the number of channels and the offerings that we have. We have added a Big 12 channel. That would be a Big 12 channel. We've added an SEC channel. We're going to provide those links here in the chat. So please subscribe. Even if you get your fill here at the Voice of College Football, if you see the bigger picture and knowing that, let's say the only thing you want to see is Miami Voice of College Football content. Let's say that's all you want to see. Well, let's understand the big picture, that if it all comes crumbling down except for the Miami channel, understand that there won't be a Miami channel. So understand that by supporting overall, that you're supporting whatever niche, whatever team, whatever conference you want to support, by supporting everything. So that doesn't mean that you need to go subscribe to a channel that's thriving and doing fine just to do it. Don't do that. You don't need to subscribe to the Miami channel. We've got 8,000, 9,000 subs. We don't need any more subs unless they're legitimate subs. So don't give us a fake sub there. However, we have started an SEC channel. That is to be explained. Most of you know that we've had an SEC channel that's been converted. That's elsewhere. That's no longer ours. So we have to start a SEC channel from scratch. And it's probably actually a better thing. It's a better, it's better for the network to start it from scratch. We've launched the SEC channel. We've got 5 or 6 videos there. So I'm going to leave the link in the chat. Please subscribe. If you hate the SEC, but you love what we do here at the Voice of College Football, subscribe to the SEC channel. You can unsubscribe when we get to 1,000 subs. Get us to 1,000 subs, SEC channel. Big 12 channel, same thing. If you could care less about the Big 12, still subscribe, please, to the Big 12 channel. Get us to 1,000 subs, then you can unsubscribe. We need to get to 1,000 subs on these channels, and I'm going to be crazy and make that a goal by football season. How about that? We can get 1,000 subs in 3 weeks. We've got the resources here with 41,000 subs. And thank you, everyone who has joined us here in the last, let's say, month. Our subscriber rate has taken off here in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So thank you for joining us. We hope you have enjoyed being here. So again, SEC channel, Big 12 channel. I'm going to leave the links in the chat. Also, as you can see on the screen below, and I've completely lost track of time. So let's see, 3:30 Eastern. In 1/2 hour is Wolfman's Call. It's Dale Wolfley, former West Virginia offensive lineman. He's got a show on the West Virginia channel every day, Monday through Thursday, 4 Eastern. And you heard that Talk is Pitt is going to be there. And then the lineup throughout the night, as our buddy John D'Adamo would say, must-see TV. Michigan live at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. The Pack chat shows at 10:30 Eastern. So where you find those, the Michigan channel, the Florida State channel, the Miami channel, and the main channel or the USC or Oregon channels. We simulcast the Pack show at 10:30 Eastern, so join us right there. If you're joining us a little bit late, keep in mind that we had some great guests earlier. Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football, and then we also had Michelle Gardner from the Arizona Republic, and most recently here, Nathan from Big 12 Mafia. I am running over to, and we're going to have a video. We're going to have to post a video that's going to outline the new look of the channels, some restructuring that's going to go on. Not a whole lot's going to change, but still just to let you know that if you're supporting certain channels that you may need to move over to another channel. And so I'm going to produce a video here in the next couple of days and lay all of that out. So here is the Big 12 channel. So please subscribe to the Big 12 channel. You're going to see some really good content there. We've just gotten started. We've got about 5 videos posted probably. I know this is stirring viewing right now, watching me type. At times I get criticized. People don't think I'm paying attention, but I'm like tweeting out the show link, or I'm, putting things in the chat. Yes, I'm always focused on the show. Yes. It's always football related or show related when I'm down here on the laptop. So don't worry about that. Okay. And then, so the Big 12 channel, the link is in the chat. We've got 66 subs. 934 gets us to 1,000. How about that? Let's do that in about 3 weeks. And then we also have our SEC channel, of which we have 59 subs. So if you are currently subscribed to the SEC channel, which has 17,000 subs, we are no longer going to be there. So keep that in mind. We will no longer be on what was previously the SEC channel with the 17,000 subs. This is where you need to find us for the SEC channel. And yes, call me crazy for saying we're going to speak out there 1,000 subs in 3 weeks for both the SEC and the Big 12 channels. We can do it thanks to your help. All of this goes because of you. I don't do anything. I am doing the same thing right now that I was doing when we had 100 subs or 12 subs. Same thing. This is successful because of you. So thank you for your engagement, your participation, your contribution, everything that you do, even if it's just watching. The only thing I ask is that if you are watching, that you would hit the like button. Anything else, hey, it's gravy, it's icing on the cake, all those cliches. Please share the videos out on social media. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. And I know I harp on the Amazon link and some of you get annoyed at that, but you're most likely already shopping on Amazon. If you use the link that we provide, you do help us grow the channel. So Amazon's getting all that money. You spend $100, Amazon gets $100. If you spend $100, use our link. Depending on the products, we get 2, 5, 8, something in that range, probably an average of 5. Then you only send 95 to Amazon and 5 to us. It's still $100 out of your pocket. No limit to it. If you spend 37 cents at Amazon, we'll get a penny or something. All right. Again, here's the lineup for tonight. Packed as always. Pardon the pun. Pac-12 fans, I feel for you. Oregon State and Washington State fans in particular, but Michigan live at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7, and then the Pac shows at 10:30 Eastern. All right, I think we've done enough damage. Again, we're going to continue to crank out videos on realignment. We're going to match up these schools and their football programs against these conferences. And again, be looking out for a channel update that's going to be coming out in the next couple days. right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. You can hang out for a few minutes, and keep in mind, if you join our Discord, that's where you can talk college football 24/7, 365. And in a mere 3 weeks, you will get my predictions. And Steve Merrill from Wager Talk, who went 13-1 against the spread. So if you go to patreon.com and /MarkRogersTV, patreon.com /MarkRogersTV, sign up right there, $5 a month. You get my picks, which have basically never failed to make money, but I don't guarantee that. And then, of course, Wager Talks, Steve Merrill with his exclusive to the Voice of College Football under the radar selection of the week. 13-1 last year. 13-1. Okay, and I think with the predictions, we're going to have most of our predictions over there, but I do think to give you some access to the predictions that we will do some here as well, is what I'm thinking. A lot to decide between now and opening night, Thursday night. Of course, we've got the week 0 games, but Thursday night, August 31st, Minnesota, Nebraska, Utah, and Florida, of course. And we will do our 24-hour marathon leading into Thursday night's games. How about that? 24 consecutive hours. So if you've not been around the Voice of College Football for the complete year, going back to the beginning of last season, you're in for a treat with the 24-hour live stream. You're in for a treat with post-game shows. Listen to this, folks. Post-game shows. Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska, Iowa, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas, USC, Oregon, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Alabama, Georgia. Don't believe I've missed anyone. I know one that's missing that's huge is we need somebody to host an Ohio State post game. So if you know anyone who is interested in hosting Ohio State post game, who's qualified, reliable, football knowledgeable, can talk, that's what we need. You need to be able to talk football, knowledgeable on football, and you're going to be reliable and not do anything stupid. Then we are looking for Ohio State post-game hosts. So if that's you, or if that's somebody you can recommend, then please let us know here at the Voice of College Football. Speaking of which, our Ohio State show is moving from Wednesday, just this week, from Wednesday to Friday, and we're still looking to do Oklahoma Live, which is typically on Wednesday, doing that on Friday as well. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. I do believe we've got one more call we'll sneak in. We got Matthew Miller, by the way, Texas Tuesdays, 7:30 Eastern, right here on the main channel. Matthew, how's it going?
It's going good, Mark. Can you hear me all right?
I gotcha.
Okay, sweet. So I got a couple questions for you. Uncle Lou came out with the video, and this is one of his more serious videos, and I actually kind of agree with it a couple weeks ago. And he talked about teams that won national championships in the 90s and winning them now. So I was wondering, you obviously know the history of college football. Do you believe a lot of the teams in the 90s, like a Nebraska, a Washington, I don't know if they won it, but Notre Dame, Florida State, are those teams still capable in your lifetime of?
Hello, Matthew.
Oh.
There we go. You're back. Okay. So I think I got your gist. Are the teams that won national championships in the 1990s capable of winning them now?
Yeah, there are a lot of, like, I wouldn't say random teams, but teams
Sure.
that really haven't come back onto the scene like they were back then.
Yeah, we could run right through them. 1990, you got Colorado and Georgia Tech. I would say no and no. 1991, I would say you've got Miami, yes. Washington, no. 1992, we've got 1992 Alabama, of course, yes. 1993 Florida State, yes. 94, 95 Nebraska, no. 96 Florida, yes. 97 Michigan, yes. Nebraska, no. 98 was Tennessee, yes. And 1999 Florida State, yes. There's my answer.
So do you think there are teams now that have won national championships that will look 25 years back or down the road and we'll look at them like a Georgia Tech? Do any come to mind?
Well, well, 25, 30 years ago, there was more of a not a disparity. There was more of a collection of a number of teams winning national championships. Therefore, there was more room for that later, decades later, if you follow me, as opposed to right now. Again, I think this is an incredible statement to make. All the meaningful college football playoff games have been won by three entities: the SEC, Clemson, and Ohio State.
Yeah.
Nobody's beaten Clemson except for Ohio State and the SEC. Nobody's beaten Ohio State except for Clemson and the SEC. Nobody's beaten the SEC except for Ohio State and Clemson. So the most likely candidate of those three entities to drop off the map would be Clemson, because they were just a good program from winning a national championship in 81 all the way through until Dabo turned them around. So if he leaves, maybe they become North Carolina again, because that's what they were for 35 years. They were North Carolina. They were 8-4 most of the time.
Yeah.
So that's possible.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then last thing, when are you coming out with your Big 12 predictions? I'm very interested to see that, because I've been deep diving, like I said, like you said, Texas 2 days, every 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm there, and I've gone down the list so far, and I'm basically breaking down the rooms one by one. And I've gone through the quarterback room, the running back room, the offensive line room, and the head coaching room for every team so far. And I know who I'm going to have number one. No surprise there, I think. Obviously, I'm a Texas fan, but the rooms have backed it up so far, everything I've looked at. And then the last place team is going to be Cincinnati. Cincinnati is going to be bad this year. After that, there's so much room between 13 and 2. It's insane. Like, there's so much.
I totally agree.
It's crazy. And there are two teams that have jumped up to me, or I should say jumped off the board when doing this. Oklahoma State has really, like, they're ranked 7th in the preseason poll. Their running back room and their quarterback room worry me a lot. The only reason I think they're going to have a good season, if they do, is because of Mike Gundy. And the team that I think is going to be better than people think is BYU. You just had the guy on for BYU. I think BYU is going to be a top 5 or 6 team in the Big 12. But other than that, those are really the only 4 teams I think I have like a decent picture of. West Virginia, actually, we did the offensive line yesterday. They had the 3rd best offensive line in the Big 12, and they had one of the 6 or 7 best running back rooms. So it's honestly, if they get decent quarterback play from Garrett Green, they might be decent. I'm not going to say pretty good, but that might be a 6-6, 7-5 team.
Yeah. So totally agree with you that there's the most parity, and it's going to be the most difficult conference to call top to bottom. Although it may be the easiest, or it's the clearest at number 1.
Yeah.
But I could see Texas playing Texas Tech, Oklahoma, those two in particular, Kansas State in the championship game. Oklahoma State, when you first said they scare you, I thought you meant they're scary good, like under the radar good. No, you mean like Alan Bowman, a quarterback. I think that's a downgrade from Spencer Sanders for as much as he turned the ball over. And I think they've obviously had a lot of transfers. They lost Mason Cobb, the heart and soul of their defense, and they've had a number of losses across the board through the transfer portal. And this is going to be even more pronounced going forward when Texas and Oklahoma leave, in regards to the parity in the league is going to be insane. You mentioned West Virginia, and it's still stuck in my head from years ago, listening to a couple pro personnel directors in the NFL say, after knowing what quarterbacks are coming back to what teams from the previous season, we look at offensive lines to determine who's going to be good. And I think that's extremely important. And West Virginia has 3 all-conference.
Yes, they're very good.
Linemen. It's very odd. I don't know what's going to happen there, because they were picked last in the conference. Well, my approach to predictions is that by nature, I wait until the very last second. Like I'm usually picking games at 11:30 a.m. just to get them out there so they're on record. Like I wait until the last second, and I do the same thing with the season, even though the good business move is I should have predictions out all summer so they can gain views, because nobody cares what my predictions are the day before the season starts. But I'll have to get after that. But Texas is certainly, I'll say it right now, I would love to be the visionary that sees a different championship game that's going to be Texas Tech and Kansas State, but I just don't know how they don't at least go 7-2 and make the number 2 seed to get into the conference title game. But I'm looking at 3 to 4 schools that could make the other spot.
Yeah, I'm basically in the same position you are, and that's why I thought I was going to have West Virginia as the 13th or 14th worst team in the Big 12. And then I looked at Cincinnati; they're obviously 14th, and I think you may come to that conclusion too. I don't know, but West Virginia, I don't understand how you can have they. You could argue they're the second best offense line in the Big 12, and then you have C.J. Donaldson at running back. At running back, and then we'll see about the defense. I mean, I don't know. It's they're really weird. I don't think they're going to finish second or anything, but I don't think I'm going to have them in the top or the bottom 2 or 3 like I thought I was going to have. It's going to be very interesting. I honestly think the second worst team in the Big 12 could beat some of the teams in the middle of the packs of other conferences. Is the conclusion I'm probably going to come to.
And that could put their administration in a tough spot in terms of keeping Neil Brown, because 6-6, 7-5 might just be just enough, or maybe it won't be. I don't know. Because West Virginia wins more than people give them credit for. If you go through their last 40 years of history, they're not used to being 6-6, 7-5.
No.
They're much better than that.
Yeah, I would say if you average it out, they're probably an 8-win team when you average out all those years, maybe even
better
than that. Their fans are better than that. They have a good fan base. It will be an interesting year. I think this year in college football is going to be interesting with all the quarterback changes. Most teams, good teams, don't have good quarterbacks. So I'm just ready to play games. I'm done with all the realignment. I want to see what happens during the season. I know it's cool to talk about, but it hurts people's institutions. I feel bad for, I know Connor on here, the Oregon State fans, the Washington State fans. I'm a Texas fan, and I think we're always going to have a place in college football, but it sucks for teams like that because, honestly, that's what makes college football different from the NFL. If you just want the 25, 30 biggest brands, that's the NFL. That's not college football. So I hope college football, the real college football, can survive. We'll see.
Yeah. People watch the NFL because the talent on the field's better. It's just a better game. And I'll offend people by saying that, but it's an obvious statement.
Yeah.
The best players in college play in the NFL. So it's just a better game. So if you take away everything that makes college unique and better than the NFL, if you take away the traditions, the pageantry, the regionality, the whole regionality aspect of it gets me, because that's how the sport became great. That's how it became unique. And that's how it came up and rose through the decades. Was there was interest in seeing a team from the West Coast play a Big Ten team and a Big Ten team playing an SEC team, because not just the style of play, but the bands are different, the food's different, the way they talk's different, their values are different, and it's just the clash and the contrast is interesting. And now it's going to be more. This gives us really great games more on a more regular basis. Do I want to see Penn State go out to the Rose Bowl and play UCLA and USC play Ohio State? Yeah, that's great. And Texas go to Death Valley on a regular basis. And all those are great matchups on the field, but it's at a sacrifice. I think, unfortunately, after a few years, though, those matchups are going to lose some luster.
Yeah.
And then we're going to still be in this more corporate, generic, sterile college football brand environment where there's no regionality.
Well, and that's the one thing why I do like what the SEC did, bring in us in Oklahoma, because at least there is some regionality there. And I think, honestly, you're reconnecting old rivalries, obviously, with Texas, Arkansas, A&M, and I think you're going to have new ones. LSU, I mean, their coaches are already talking crap to our coaches because we're stealing Colin Simmons. I don't know if you've seen that recruitment. 5-star.
Heard about it.
Yeah, and he's leaning Texas right now, but he could go to LSU. But there's been a lot of rumors thrown out there that we're basically overpaying for guys that they want, stuff like that. So I think that's going to be a rivalry in the future. We already don't like each other from that 19 LSU game. So that's going to be an interesting one. But I agree. If people say regionality doesn't matter, it does, because look at all the rivals. All of them are within your region. It does matter. So it sucks if that's what it's going to come down to, which it seems it is, which is money over everything, like most things are, unfortunately. But I think you have to have some of the humanity in it as well, because if you get rid of like these smaller schools and all it is a corporate version, just like the NFL is, and you're not even playing with the same type of talent that the NFL is, because not all those guys are going to play there, then I think you're going to lose some people.
Yeah, because it's going to be a minor league version of the NFL.
Yeah.
And the only defense I'll have for the Big Ten, because you make a great point about the SEC, the expansion at least makes sense geographically and in regards to bringing rivals back together. That the Big Ten didn't have that option.
Yeah.
There aren't schools within their footprint that bring any value from a playing standpoint or a recruiting standpoint. So they had to go outside their region. It's the only box the Big Ten can't check is there's not enough football players within the footprint. So they've got to go to California, and who knows what their next move is going to be, if that's going to be going to Florida.
Yeah, we'll see. That'll be interesting with Florida State. But this will be my last question, Mark. In the next 3 years, will Notre Dame be in a conference? Or are they just going to be independent for the rest of the time?
Well, I'll answer it this way. I never give a short answer, or rarely give a short answer. So this is my explanation of what's going to move Notre Dame. One of two things: either just the sheer money. They're going to be faced with, we make $25 million per football season. We can make $90 million per football season. So we've got to make this move. We can only be, we can only adhere to our principles or our values or whatever they want to say about their unique brand. And I get it. If you're in that situation and you can be the only one of your kind, it makes you stand out in a certain way. So I get why they want to hold on to that. But if they're going to be $60 million behind the Big Ten and the SEC every football season, that's just not $60 million. That's $600 million over 10 years.
Yeah.
So either the sheer money differential is going to force them, or if the conferences were organized, this is what I would do. If they collaborated, I'd say, if Notre Dame doesn't join a conference, freeze them out. Don't schedule them. And we're going to freeze them out and force them to join a conference. Otherwise, they can't play football if they have no one to schedule. That's what I would do.
Yeah. The problem is with that.
Happen.
Yeah, because they're not going to do that, because that will take money out of their pockets too, because they get a lot of money for scheduling Notre Dame.
Temporarily.
Yeah. But the SEC
if they had the long game, if they were playing the long game, that's what they would do.
Yeah. The SEC also has no incentive to do that, though, either, because they know they're not getting Notre Dame. It's either going to be the ACC or the Big Ten, most likely the Big Ten. So, and that's the thing, they're not going to want to help out the Big Ten in any way.
So I'm going to say 60-40 no, that Notre Dame will still be independent in 3 years.
Let's put it this way. I'll have a lot more respect for them than I used to, because that will just be like, I don't know, just be like a big, no, we're not doing this. I don't give a crap. We're going to be here for the end of time. We're better than you type of move. So I respect it, but it's fun. It's just funny at this point, honestly.
Matthew, I'm going to subject you to my quick rant about Notre Dame in 2020 in the ACC, because I went nuts during that entire time that the ACC bowed to Notre Dame when they had them on the ropes, when Notre Dame needed to join a conference to play at COVID season, that the ACC didn't say, you can play in our league, but you got to sign a 20-year contract or something, or to the end of the grant of rights. But that the ACC let them off the hook. And what I would have thought would have been poetic justice, and it's almost happened, would be for Notre Dame to take advantage of them, to use them, and to win the conference in just the 1 year they were there, and then leave again.
No, it would have been funny.
And they went to the championship game. That's just a joke that they're going to be, can you imagine? I can't, the SEC or the Big Ten, allowing a school to abuse them like that and say, we'll contract you for 5 or 6 games, but we're not playing in your conference. And we're going to use you for all our non-revenue sports because they need to be in a conference. How ridiculous.
But that's exactly why the ACC is in the position it's in, is weak leadership. They won't exist by in a couple of years because of it. So, I mean, it worked in that sense because you made a lot of money off Notre Dame, but in 5 years, you're probably not going to even be remembered. So that's what happens, unfortunately, for them now. Okay, Mark, thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, good stuff from Matthew Miller. So who that was, even though you didn't see his voice or I did not get a graphic up there, Matthew hosts our Texas Tuesdays We should get a good crowd in there on Tuesdays because he knows Texas football. Believe me, knows his Texas football. If you love Texas, you got to be there. If you hate Texas, check him out Tuesday nights, 7:30 Eastern, right here on the national channel. All right. I'm going to take, well, I'm actually not taking any time off, but I'm going to be off here for about 2 hours. We get the Wolfman's Call right now. We've got John hosting Michigan Live at 5 over on the Michigan channel. So please get there for the Michigan show. He's got a great guest lined up for today's show at 5 o'clock Eastern, right here at the Voice of College Football. See you in a couple hours. Stop. The presses. I forgot super chats. I'm so sorry. We cannot forget super chats. We cannot do that. Here we go. I hope John Teal is still here. What do you got here, John? Blue blood should be good through multiple coaches. So we had an argument about what a blue blood is. I've got my definition. I'm sure you have yours. I'm not married to mine. It's just my own personal definition. Of course, blue blood, the term comes from royalty, meaning you're born into it. So Clemson will never be a blue blood under my definition because they weren't a blue blood. They can be elite. And that's more important to me is, are you elite? And so Georgia really not a blue blood either. And blue blood doesn't mean a whole lot. It just means that when the sport was growing at its infancy, Notre Dame, Michigan, Alabama, and then quickly Ohio State and others were at the outset of the growth of the sport and were the very best. All right, then we got John coming back with ESPN hunted the ACCs. What you got there, bud? ESPN hunted the ACC. What you got there, bud? Somebody can interpret that for me, but thank you so much for the contribution there, John. And then we got Jason chiming in with Stanford and Cal to the ACC makes no sense and will get voted no. The ACC needs to survive. So, Jason, absolutely, it makes no sense. Makes no sense. All these moves to date, even though they've not made sense geographically or in regards to history, at least there is a connection. At least anyone moving from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten has been joined with the largest and most important and most prestigious bowl game, the Rose Bowl. So USC has a long history against Ohio State and Michigan and others in the Rose Bowl. UCLA as well, and plays in the stadium that is the goal of every Big Ten team every season going back to the 1950s to go to the Rose. So there's some connection there. And then with Washington, Oregon, to a lesser extent, but still Pac-12 championships. Washington just played in a Rose Bowl in 2018, Oregon in 2019. So there's been connection between the Big Ten and the Pac-12. The SEC arrivals, there's a connection there. We went through that. The Big 12, well, they did what they did. The Big 12 is kind of like an amped up Conference USA at this point. Yes, Stanford has never scheduled ACC games, and neither is Cal, aside from one North Carolina home and home that I can remember from about 10 years ago. But appreciate the conversation, everyone, and we will see you Michigan Live at 5. That's your next destination right here at the Voice of College Football.